Hey everyone, tonight we're stepping into the Star Wars galaxy to uncover one of its most intriguing hidden mysteries. The kind of secret that has been whispered about in the forgotten corners of the Outer Rim, where ancient Jedi once walked. Among the stars and legends were born in the silence between worlds. It's a story filled with unexpected revelations, lost knowledge, and truths that were buried beneath centuries of galactic conflict and shadow. So before we begin this journey together, take a moment to hit that like button if you're ready for tonight's adventure, and don't forget to subscribe if you enjoy these deep explorations into the Star Wars universe. Drop a comment and let me know what part of the galaxy you're listening from tonight. I love seeing our community come together from across the stars for these stories. Now, get comfortable, maybe dim those lights, settle into your favorite spot, and let your mind prepare for a journey to a time when the Force flowed differently through the galaxy. Long before the Empire cast its shadow across the galaxy, before the Clone Wars tore the Republic apart, there existed a place where the Force itself seemed to whisper secrets that were never meant for mortal ears. On a world whose name has been struck from even the most ancient star charts, where twin moons cast perpetual twilight across crystalline spires, stands the remnant of what was once the most sacred site in all the galaxy. The Nexus Temple, they called it in the old tongue. A place where the very fabric of the Force was said to be thin enough that one could glimpse the threads that bind all living things together. But something went wrong there. Something that the Jedi Order spent 1,000 years trying to forget. The last transmission from the Nexus Temple came during the height of the Old Republic. It was a single word, spoken in the ancient Jedi language, transmitted across the galaxy with such Force-enhanced power that it shattered every holocron it touched and drove 3 Jedi Masters on Coruscant to their knees in sudden, overwhelming terror. The word was Kethes. The Sundering. What followed was a conspiracy of silence that would span generations. The Jedi Council ordered the temple sealed. The star charts were altered. The hyperspace routes were redirected. Within a century, most Jedi believed the Nexus Temple had never existed at all, but the temple did not simply disappear. It waited. As the Clone Wars raged and the Jedi Order faced its darkest hour, the temple began to call out once more. Not with words this time, but with something far more subtle and infinitely more dangerous. Dreams. Jedi across the galaxy began experiencing the same vision. They saw themselves walking through corridors of living crystal, where the walls themselves pulsed with the rhythm of some vast sleeping heart. They saw chambers filled with artifacts that predated the Republic, technologies that merged seamlessly with the Force in ways that modern science could not explain. The dreams were strongest among the young Padawans. They would wake screaming about visions of crystal halls and ancient guardians, about a voice that called to them from across the stars, promising answers to questions they had never thought to ask. The last dream came to a Padawan named Kira Thorne just 3 days before Order 66 was executed. She saw herself standing in the temple's central chamber, her hand resting on a crystalline sphere that contained what looked like a miniature galaxy. In her dream, she heard an ancient voice filled with profound sadness. The children of the Force have forgotten their birthright, the voice said. They have become servants when they were meant to be guardians. They have chosen safety over truth, and in doing so, they have doomed themselves to repeat the mistakes of those who came before. Kira woke from that dream with tears on her cheeks and a burning certainty that the temple was real, that it was calling to her, and that she was perhaps the only one left who could answer that call. But before she could act on this knowledge, the clone troopers turned their weapons on their Jedi commanders, and the galaxy plunged into darkness. The Nexus Temple's call went unanswered. The dreams stopped. For 19 long years, the temple waited in silence once more. Until now. Tonight, we follow the journey of someone who refused to let those secrets die. Someone who heard the echo of that ancient call and decided to risk everything to uncover the truth about What the Jedi really lost when they turned their backs on the Nexus Temple. The twin moons are rising over the forgotten world tonight, casting their eternal twilight across the crystal spires. The temple stirs from its long sleep, and somewhere in the galaxy, a seeker of truth takes the first step on a journey that will lead them to the very heart of the mystery. Welcome to the Nexus Temple. Welcome to the place where legends are born and heroes are broken. The story begins now. The shuttle's engines hummed softly as it descended through the atmosphere of a world that existed on no official star charts. You pressed your face against the viewport, watching as twin moons painted the landscape below in shades of silver and deep purple. Crystal formations jutted from the surface like frozen lightning, and in the distance, you could see the unmistakable silhouette of ancient spires reaching toward the stars. Your name is Joran Kale, and you are perhaps one of the last Force sensitives to remember the old stories. Born on Alderaan just months before its destruction, you were raised by your grandmother who had once served as an archivist in the Jedi Temple. She filled your childhood with whispered tales of the time before the Empire, when the Jedi were guardians of peace and justice throughout the galaxy. But it was the story of the Nexus Temple that haunted your dreams. Your grandmother had been there the day the last transmission arrived from the forgotten world. She had watched as the ancient holocrons cracked and shattered, their crystalline hearts unable to contain the raw power of that single word, Kethas. She had seen the terror in the eyes of the council members as they realized what it meant. And she had been present when the decision was made to erase the temple from history itself. Now, 20 years after the fall of the Empire, as the new Republic struggles to rebuild what was lost, you have finally found the coordinates that your grandmother hid within an encrypted data crystal. The journey has taken you to the furthest reaches of the unknown regions, following hyperspace routes that were deliberately obscured centuries ago. Your pilot, a grizzled Corellian named Dex Corrin, glances back at you with concern. He fought alongside Jedi during the Clone Wars before becoming a smuggler, and he's seen enough of the galaxy's dark corners to know when something feels wrong. The Force is different here, Dex says quietly, his weathered hand steady on the controls despite the unease in his voice. It's like the air itself is holding its breath. You nod, feeling it too. The sensation had begun the moment you dropped out of hyperspace. The Force flows around this world like water around a stone, creating eddies and currents that seem to pulse with their own rhythm. It's neither light nor dark, but something older than both. Something that existed before the Jedi and Sith defined the boundaries of the Force itself. The shuttle touches down on a crystalline landing platform that appears to have been grown rather than built. The surface beneath your feet is smooth as glass but warm to the touch, and you can feel a subtle vibration running through it, as if the entire structure is alive and breathing. Before you stretches a pathway of the same living crystal, leading toward what was once the main entrance to the Nexus Temple. The spires you saw from orbit tower above you now, their surfaces reflecting the light of the twin moons in patterns that seem to shift and change as you watch. Carved into their faces are symbols that predate any language you recognize, yet somehow their meaning whispers at the edges of your consciousness. Welcome, seeker of truth. Dex shoulders his pack and activates a portable scanner, frowning at the readings. This whole place is saturated with some kind of energy I've never seen before, he mutters. My instruments can barely function. Whatever happened here, it left a permanent mark on the very fabric of space. You close your eyes and extend your senses through the Force, trying to understand what you're feeling. The temple grounds stretch out before you like a vast web of interconnected energy. Every crystal formation, every carved stone, every pathway seems to be part of a greater design. It's as if the entire complex was built to channel and focus the Force in ways that the modern Jedi Order never imagined possible. But beneath that sense of ancient purpose, you detect something else. A sadness so profound it makes your heart ache. The stone remembers what happened here. The crystals hold echoes of voices raised in panic and despair. And somewhere in the depths of the temple complex, something that was once alive continues to wait in the space between life and death. As you walk along the crystal pathway, you notice that the symbols carved into the spires begin to glow with a soft inner light. The illumination follows your progress, creating a trail of luminescence that guides you toward the temple's heart. Dex notices it too, his hand instinctively moving to the blaster at his hip. "I've got a bad feeling about this," he says, echoing words that have become a familiar refrain among those who've learned to trust their instincts in dangerous situations. But you press forward, driven by a certainty that has been building within you since childhood. This place holds answers to questions that have plagued you for years. Why did the Jedi Council make the decision to seal away their most sacred site? What was the sundering that drove 3 masters to their knees in terror? And what connection does this forgotten temple have to the fall of the Jedi Order itself? The pathway leads to a massive archway carved from a single piece of crystal, so pure it seems to contain entire galaxies within its depths. Ancient Aurebesh characters spiral around the frame, but these are older than any you've studied. They speak of balance, of harmony between opposing forces, of a time when the galaxy was young and the Force flowed freely through all living things. As you approach the threshold, you feel the weight of history pressing down upon you. Thousands of Jedi once walked through this very archway. They came seeking wisdom, seeking understanding of their place in the cosmic order. Many found what they were looking for. Others discovered truths too terrible to bear. Your grandmother's voice echoes in your memory, repeating the warning she gave you before her death. The Nexus Temple shows you what you need to see, not what you want to see. And sometimes, young Joran, the truth is more dangerous than any lie. The Force swirls around you as you step through the archway, and for a moment, you could swear you hear the whisper of ancient voices welcoming you home. The crystal archway dissolves behind you as you cross the threshold, and you find yourself standing in what can only be described as a living cathedral. The walls stretch impossibly high, their surface is carved from the same luminescent crystal that forms the temple's exterior, but here the material pulses with a rhythm that matches your heartbeat. Veins of blue and silver light run through the stone-like arteries, carrying some form of energy that makes the air itself shimmer with potential. Dex whistles low under his breath, his usual smuggler's cynicism replaced by genuine awe. In all my years running cargo through the unknown regions, I've never seen anything like this. It's like the whole place is alive. You nod absently, your attention drawn to the intricate murals that cover every available surface. These aren't mere decorations, but historical records painted in a style that predates the Republic by millennia. The images seem to move in your peripheral vision, telling stories that span eons of galactic history. Here, you see the first Force, sensitives learning to channel the cosmic energy that binds all things together. There, you witness the construction of the first temples, built not by technology, but by minds working in perfect harmony with the Force itself. But it's the central mural that captures your attention completely. It depicts a figure seated in meditation, neither male nor female, neither young nor old, surrounded by representations of every Force tradition you've ever heard of and several you haven't. Jedi, Sith, the Night Sisters of Dathomir, the Guardians of the Wills, and others whose symbols you don't recognize. All of them are connected by threads of light that flow from the central figure, like a web encompassing the entire galaxy. At the base of this mural, carved in the ancient script, are words that make your blood run cold as their meaning becomes clear in your mind. Here lies the first teacher, who showed us that the Force is not a tool to be wielded, but a responsibility to be embraced. Here lies the last student, who learned too late that knowledge without wisdom is the path to destruction. Dex approaches one of the smaller alcoves that line the cathedral's walls, each containing what appears to be a meditation platform surrounded by focusing crystals. When he reaches out to touch one of the crystals, it flares to life with such intensity that he stumbles backward, shielding his eyes from the brilliance. Don't touch anything else. You warn him, though you suspect the damage may already be done. The entire chamber seems to be responding to your presence now, with lights cascading along the walls in patterns that remind you of neural pathways. The temple is awakening after centuries of slumber, and you can feel its ancient systems coming online one by one. Your grandmother's stories had prepared you for the visual splendor of the Nexus Temple, but nothing could have prepared you for the way the Force behaves in this place. It doesn't simply flow around you as it does elsewhere in the galaxy. Instead, it seems to pool and eddy, forming currents and streams that you can almost see with your naked eyes. When you close your eyes and extend your senses, you perceive layers upon layers of Force energy, each one carrying echoes of the countless souls who once meditated in these halls. The path deeper into the temple is clearly marked by the flowing patterns of light in the floor, leading you through a series of chambers that each serve a different purpose. The first contains what you recognize as training areas, though the methods employed here differ radically from anything taught in the modern Jedi Order. Instead of lightsaber combat forms, the walls depict figures learning to manipulate matter at the molecular level, to commune with the living force in ways that blur the line between science and mysticism. The second chamber houses what appears to be a vast library, though the knowledge here isn't contained in holocrons or data crystals. Instead, the information is stored within the crystal walls themselves, accessed through direct mental contact with the Force-enhanced matrix. When you place your palm against one of the glowing surfaces, images flood your mind with such intensity that you have to pull away, gasping. In that brief contact, you saw the true history of the Jedi Order, not the sanitized version taught to Padawans, but the complete record of their triumphs and failures stretching back to the dawn of galactic civilization. You saw the first Jedi, not as noble knights, but as scholars and philosophers trying to understand their place in the cosmic order. You witnessed the gradual transformation of the Order from seekers of knowledge into guardians of peace, and the compromises that transformation required. Most disturbing of all, you saw the prophecies, hidden within the deepest archives of the Kong Nexus Temple, were predictions that foretold the rise and fall of the Jedi Order with terrifying accuracy. The Clone Wars, the rise of the Empire, even the specific details of Order 66 had all been foreseen by the ancient masters who once called this place home, and they had done nothing to prevent it. Dex notices your distress and approaches carefully, his hand resting on his blaster, but his expression concerned rather than threatening. "What did you see in there, kid? You look like you've seen a ghost. Worse than ghosts," you reply, your voice barely above a whisper. "I saw the truth. The Jedi Council knew what was coming. They had access to prophecies that could have saved the Order, could have prevented the Empire from rising. But they chose to ignore them. The revelation hits you like a physical blow. Everything you've been taught about the fall of the Jedi, every story of heroic sacrifice and noble defeat, has been built on a foundation of lies. The Masters of the Nexus Temple had offered their knowledge freely to the Jedi Council, but that knowledge had been rejected, dismissed as dangerous heresy that threatened the Order's carefully maintained dogma. As you move deeper into the temple, complex, the architecture becomes increasingly alien. The clean lines and geometric patterns of the outer chambers give way to organic curves and flowing designs that seem to have been grown rather than built. The force currents here are so strong that they create visible distortions in the air, and you find yourself having to concentrate simply to maintain your balance. The third chamber contains what you initially mistake for a garden, but as you look closer, you realize that the plants growing here aren't like anything in the known galaxy. They seem to be composed of crystallized force energy, their leaves and flowers glowing with an inner light that responds to your emotional state. When you feel wonder, they pulse with warm golden hues. When doubt creeps into your mind, they Shift to cooler blues and purples. At the center of this impossible garden stands a fountain. But instead of water, it flows with liquid light that defies every law of physics you understand. The substance rises from the fountain's base in spiraling helixes, forming complex patterns in the air before dissolving back into the pool below. As you watch, you begin to see images forming in the flowing light. Faces of Jedi you don't recognize. Worlds you've never visited. Events that span the entire history of the galaxy. One image in particular catches your attention. A young woman with eyes the color of starlight stands in this very chamber, her hands pressed against the fountain's rim as tears stream down her face. You recognize her immediately from your grandmother's descriptions. This is Kira Thorne, the Padawan who received the final vision from the Nexus Temple before Order 66 destroyed everything. But the image shows more than just her presence here. You see her making a choice, her hands moving in complex patterns as she channels the force through the fountain's matrix. She's doing something to the temple itself, altering its fundamental structure in ways that will allow it to survive the coming darkness. The realization dawns on you with crystalline clarity. Kira Thorne didn't just receive visions from the Nexus Temple. She became part of it. Dex has been studying the walls of the garden chamber, trying to make sense of the symbols carved into their surfaces. These aren't just decorations, he says, his voice filled with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. They're instructions. A manual for operating some kind of massive machine. You turn your attention to the carvings he's indicated, and your breath catches in your throat. The symbols describe a process that you recognize from your studies of ancient force techniques. The entire Nexus Temple isn't just a place of learning and meditation. It's a massive focusing array, designed to channel the force energy of an entire star system through a single point. But the process requires a living consciousness to guide it, someone willing to sacrifice their individual existence to become one with the temple's matrix. The fourth chamber confirms your growing suspicions. Here, arranged in a perfect circle, around a raised dais, are 13 meditation platforms. Each one bears the name of a Jedi Master who came to the Nexus Temple in the final days before its sealing. 12 of the platforms are empty, their surfaces cracked and darkened with age. But the 13th, the one at the center of the circle, still glows with a soft inner light dot as you approach this central platform. You feel a presence that makes every hair on your body stand on end. Someone is here, not physically present, but existing in a state somewhere between life and death, between consciousness and oblivion. The presence is ancient beyond measure, yet there's something familiar about it, something that resonates with the deepest parts of your being. When you place your hand on the platform surface, the voice that fills your mind is neither male nor female, neither young nor old. It carries the weight of millennia and the sadness of watching civilizations rise and fall like waves upon a cosmic shore. Welcome, child of two worlds. Welcome, seeker of forbidden truths. You have come far to reach this place, and the journey has only just begun. The voice belongs to the figure you saw in the mural, the first teacher and last student whose sacrifice created the Nexus Temple's focusing array. But as the consciousness touches your mind, you realize that this being is not just one individual, but a collective of all the masters, who chose to merge their essence with the Temple's matrix. Kira Thorne is here, along with the 13 masters who preceded her, and dozens of others whose names have been lost to history. You have questions. The voice continues, and questions deserve answers. But first, you must understand the choice that brought us to this state. The Jedi Order was dying long before the Empire struck its final blow. It had become rigid, dogmatic, unable to adapt to the changing nature of the Force itself. We who came to this place saw the future that awaited, and we chose to preserve what could be saved rather than watch it all burn to ash. Images flood your mind, showing you the true history of the Nexus Temple. You see the original builders, beings of such ancient lineage that they predate the known species of the galaxy. You witness the first Jedi to discover this place, their wonder and terror at finding technology that merged seamlessly with the Force. You experience the gradual realization that the temple was more than a sanctuary. It was a lifeline, a way to preserve the wisdom of the ages against the darkness that was coming. But preservation came at a price. To become one with the temple's matrix meant abandoning individual existence, surrendering personal identity to become part of something greater. The 13 masters made that choice willingly, knowing that their sacrifice would ensure the survival of the Jedi legacy, even if the Order itself fell. Now you stand at the same crossroads they once faced. The temple has awakened because the galaxy needs its wisdom once again. The New Republic struggles with threats it doesn't understand. Dark side cults rise in the shadows. Force sensitives are born without guidance or training. The balance that the Jedi once maintained is slowly crumbling, and only the knowledge preserved within the Nexus Temple can restore it. But accessing that knowledge requires a guardian. Someone willing to bridge the gap between the living and the preserved, between the present and the past. Someone who can carry the Temple's wisdom back to the galaxy, while ensuring that its secrets don't fall into the wrong hands. The choice is yours. Joran Kale, will you take up the burden that we have carried for so long? Will you become the bridge between worlds that the galaxy desperately needs? The weight of the collective consciousness presses against your mind like a gentle tide, carrying with it the accumulated wisdom and sorrow of centuries. You step back from the meditation platform, your hands trembling as you try to process what you've just experienced. The choice they're offering you feels both inevitable and impossible. To become a guardian of this knowledge would mean sacrificing everything you've ever known about yourself. Yet walking away would mean abandoning the galaxy to repeat the same mistakes that led to the Jedi's destruction. Dex notices your distress and moves closer, his weathered face creased with concern. Talk to me, kid. What's going on in that head of yours? You look like someone just asked you to jump into a sarlacc pit. You want to explain. But how do you put into words the enormity of what you've discovered? Instead, you gesture toward the walls of the chamber, where new symbols have begun to appear, glowing with the same inner light as the meditation platform. These aren't the ancient inscriptions you saw earlier, but fresh writings that seem to be forming in real time, as if the temple itself is composing a message specifically for you. The symbols resolve into meaning as you focus on them, revealing the first detailed account of what really happened during the final days of the Nexus Temple. The story begins not with the transmission of the word Kethes, but months earlier, when the Temple's seers first detected the approaching catastrophe that would engulf the galaxy. Master Velen Cross had been the Temple's chief historian, a Syrian, whose elongated skull housed one of the most brilliant minds in the Jedi Order. It was he who first noticed the disturbances in the Force that heralded the coming of the Clone Wars. But unlike the Council on Coruscant, who dismissed such concerns as the product of an overactive imagination, the Masters of the Nexus Temple understood that they were witnessing the first tremors of an apocalypse that would shake the very foundations of the galaxy. Working in conjunction with the Temple's focusing array, Master Cross had penetrated deeper into the flow of time than any Jedi before him. What he saw there filled him with such terror that he aged a decade in a single night. The future he witnessed wasn't just the fall of the Jedi Order, but the complete corruption of everything they had stood for. He saw Anakin Skywalker's transformation into Darth Vader, the systematic execution of the Jedi by their own clone armies, and the rise of an emperor whose power would eclipse even the ancient Sith Lords. But most horrifying of all, he saw that the Jedi Council's response to these visions would be to dismiss them entirely. The Order had become so invested in its own infallibility that it could no longer accept the possibility of failure. When Master Cross brought his warnings to Coruscant, he was told that his methods were dangerous. that attempting to see too far into the future violated the Jedi Code's emphasis on living in the present moment. The rejection stung, but it also crystallized a growing realization among the Temple's masters. The Jedi Order as it existed could not be saved. It had become too rigid, too dependent on political authority, too willing to compromise its principles for the sake of maintaining peace. If the knowledge and wisdom accumulated over millennia were to survive, it would have to be preserved outside the institutional framework that was doomed to collapse. And so began the Great Preservation, a project that would consume the final years of the Nexus Temple's active period. Working in absolute secrecy, the Masters began transferring their most precious knowledge into the Temple's crystal matrix. But this wasn't simply a matter of copying data from one storage medium to another. The process required each Master to literally merge their consciousness with the Temple's focusing array, surrendering their individual existence to become part of a collective intelligence that could safeguard the wisdom of ages. The first to undergo this transformation was Master Yupi Solara, a Twi'lek whose expertise in force healing had saved countless lives during the border conflicts that preceded the Clone Wars. Her sacrifice established the template that others would follow, proving that consciousness could indeed survive the transition into the Temple's matrix while retaining both memory and personality. But the process was irreversible, and each transformation diminished the number of living Masters available to complete the project. As you read this history, written in light upon the Temple walls, you begin to understand the true scope of what was accomplished here. This wasn't just the preservation of knowledge, but the creation of an entirely new form of existence. The Masters who chose to merge with the Temple didn't simply die and leave their memories behind. They continued to live, think, and grow within the crystalline network that formed the Temple's consciousness. They had become something unprecedented in galactic history, a collective of individual minds that retained their distinct personalities while sharing a common purpose. The process accelerated as news of the Clone Wars reached the Temple. Master after Master made the ultimate sacrifice, adding their unique perspectives and abilities to the growing collective. The Temple's focusing array, originally designed to channel force energy for meditation and healing, was gradually transformed into something far more complex. It became a living library, a repository of not just information but actual wisdom, capable of making decisions and forming judgments based on the accumulated experience of its component minds. But even as the Great Preservation neared completion, the Masters faced a terrible dilemma. The Temple's location was known to the Jedi Council, and it was only a matter of time before they sent investigators to determine why the Nexus Temple had fallen silent. If the Council discovered what had been done here, they would almost certainly attempt to destroy what they would see as an abomination, a violation of the natural order that threatened the very concept of individual existence. The solution came from an unexpected source. Padawan Kira Thorne, who had been experiencing prophetic dreams about the Temple for months, arrived just as the final preparations were being made. Unlike the Council members who had dismissed Master Cross's warnings, Kira understood immediately what was at stake. She volunteered to become the final guardian, the living bridge between the collective consciousness and the outside world. But Kira's role would be different from that of the Masters who had preceded her. Instead of completely merging with the Temple's matrix, she would maintain a partial existence in both states, serving as an interpreter between the collective and any future seekers who might find their way to this forgotten world. The process was dangerous and had never been attempted before, but it was the only way to ensure that the Temple's knowledge would remain accessible while protecting it from those who might seek to misuse it. The transformation took place just days before the Jedi Purge began. As clone troopers across the galaxy turned their weapons on their Jedi commanders, Kira Thorne underwent a metamorphosis that would bind her consciousness to the Nexus Temple for all eternity. The process was recorded in the Temple's matrix with Such precision that you can feel her terror and determination as if they were your own emotions. The pain of the transformation was beyond anything she had ever experienced. It felt as though every atom of her being was being pulled apart and reassembled in a new configuration. But worse than the physical agony was the psychological trauma of feeling her individual identity beginning to dissolve into something larger. For terrifying moments, she lost all sense of who she was, becoming nothing more than a fragment of awareness floating in an ocean of other minds. But Kira held on to one anchor that kept her from being completely absorbed into the collective. Her love for the Jedi ideals that had shaped her life, her determination to preserve something good and true from the darkness that was consuming the galaxy. That love became the core of her new existence, the part of herself that remained distinctly Kira Thorne, even as she became part of something infinitely larger. The final act of the great preservation was the transmission of the word Keves to the Jedi Council. This wasn't meant as a warning or a threat, but as a funeral dirge for an age that was ending. The Masters knew that by the time their message reached Coruscant, Order 66 would already be in motion. The transmission was their way of saying goodbye to the Order they had served so faithfully, even as they ensured that its legacy would survive in hidden form. The Council's reaction was exactly what the Masters had predicted. Terrified by the raw power of the transmission and unable to comprehend its true meaning, they ordered the temple sealed and its location erased from all records. The Nexus Temple vanished from galactic history, becoming nothing more than a ghost story whispered in the darkest corners of the Jedi archives. For 20 years, the collective consciousness waited in silence, watching through the Force as the galaxy struggled under Imperial rule. They witnessed Luke Skywalker's journey from farm boy to Jedi Knight, felt the Emperor's death above Endor, and observed the New Republic's efforts to rebuild what the Empire had destroyed. But they also saw the new threats emerging from the shadows, dark side cults and Sith pretenders who sought to exploit the power vacuum left by the Empire's collapse. The time for silence was ending. The galaxy needed the wisdom of the ancient masters now more than ever, but it also needed someone who could carry that wisdom back to the living world. The collective had preserved the knowledge, but they could not act upon it directly. They needed a bridge, a guardian who could translate their accumulated wisdom into action. And so they began to call out once again, not with dreams this time, but with subtle manipulations of the Force itself. They guided your grandmother to the hidden data crystal that contained the temple's coordinates. They influenced the events that led to your meeting with Dex, ensuring that you would have a pilot skilled enough to navigate the treacherous hyperspace routes to this forgotten world. They even arranged for the Imperial remnants that had been hunting you to be delayed, just long enough for you to complete your journey. Every step that brought you to this place had been orchestrated by minds that existed outside the normal flow of time, masters who could see the threads of causality stretching across decades and manipulate them with surgical precision. But despite their vast power and accumulated wisdom, they could not make the final choice for you. The decision to become their guardian, to accept the responsibility of bridging two worlds, had to be made freely. As the full scope of this revelation settles into your consciousness, you realize that you're standing at the most crucial crossroads in galactic history. The knowledge preserved within the Nexus Temple could prevent another catastrophe like the one that destroyed the Jedi Order. It could guide the New Republic away from the mistakes that doomed the Old Republic. It could ensure that future generations of Force sensitives receive proper training and guidance instead of stumbling blindly toward the dark side. But accepting this responsibility would mean surrendering your old life completely. You would become something unprecedented, a living conduit between the world of the flesh and the realm of preserved consciousness. The Masters are offering you immortality of a sort, but it's an immortality bound to service. An existence dedicated entirely to safeguarding and dispensing the wisdom of ages. Dex watches you carefully as you absorb this flood of information. his expression growing increasingly concerned. "You've been standing there for nearly an hour, kid. Just staring at those symbols like they're the most important thing in the galaxy. What are they telling you?" You turn to face your companion, seeing him clearly for perhaps the first time since your journey began. The collective consciousness has shown you his true nature, the role he was meant to play in bringing you to this moment. Dex isn't just a smuggler who happened to be available when you needed transport. He's a descendant of one of the original masters, carrying dormant force sensitivity. That makes him uniquely suited to navigate the dangerous space around the temple. But that revelation will have to wait. Right now, you need to focus on the choice before you, a decision that will determine not just your own fate, but the future of the entire galaxy. The decision weighs upon you like a physical burden as you stand before the meditation platform, feeling the gentle pull of the collective consciousness that waits within the temple's crystalline heart. Part of you wants to accept immediately, to embrace the role of guardian and bridge between worlds that the ancient masters have offered. But another part, the part that still clings to your individual identity and the life you've built for yourself, rebels against the idea of such complete surrender. You close your eyes and extend your senses through the Force, trying to find clarity in the swirling currents of energy that flow through the temple. What you discover instead is a revelation that changes everything you thought you understood about the choice before you. The collective consciousness isn't asking you to sacrifice your individual existence as the original masters did. They're offering you something far more complex and potentially more dangerous. The voice that speaks in your mind now belongs specifically to Kira Thorne, her consciousness separating itself from the collective, just enough to communicate directly with you. The process she underwent 20 years ago was experimental, untested, and partially successful. She retained enough of her individual identity to serve as an interpreter between the collective and the outside world, but she also lost something essential in the transformation. She became trapped between two states of being, neither fully alive nor completely merged with the template matrix. Listen carefully, Joran Kale. Her voice whispers in your thoughts, carrying with it the weight of 2 decades spent in existential limbo. The choice they offer you is not the same as the one I made. The masters have learned from my experience, refined the process, found a way to preserve individual consciousness while still creating the bridge they need. But the price is different, and in some ways more terrible than what I endured. Images flood your mind, showing you the true nature of the guardianship being offered. You would not lose your individual identity, but you would become something unprecedented in the galaxy's history. A living nexus between the world of matter and the realm of pure consciousness, capable of channeling the collective's wisdom while maintaining your own thoughts and feelings. But this gift comes with an almost unbearable burden. As the Guardian, you would experience every moment of galactic history stored within the temple's matrix. You would feel the pain of every Jedi who died during Order 66, the fear of every youngling who was hunted down by Vader's Inquisitors, the despair of every Force-sensitive who was corrupted by the dark side. The collective's memories would become your memories, their experiences your experiences, their accumulated trauma your personal burden to bear. But that's not the worst part. The truly terrifying aspect of the guardianship is the responsibility it entails. With access to the collective's vast knowledge comes the ability to see the future with frightening clarity. You would know in advance which political decisions would lead to war, which Jedi would fall to the dark side, which worlds would suffer under the weight of their own choices. And you would be compelled to act on that knowledge, to manipulate events from behind the scenes to prevent catastrophes that only you could foresee. The Masters call it the burden of prophetic knowledge, and it has driven previous Guardians to the edge of madness. To know the future but be unable to prevent all suffering, to see the chains of causality that bind every choice to its consequences, to watch people you care about make decisions that you know will destroy them. The collective shows you the fate of the last guardian who held this position. A Jedi named Koreth Vex, who accepted the role 3 centuries ago during the Great Sith War. Koreth had been a model Jedi, devoted to peace and justice, beloved by his peers for his wisdom and compassion. But the guardianship changed him in ways that the Masters hadn't anticipated. The constant exposure to the galaxy's accumulated trauma gradually eroded his empathy, replacing it with a cold, calculating pragmatism that viewed sentient beings as pieces on a cosmic game board. He began to see the suffering of individuals as acceptable losses in service of a greater good, manipulating events with such ruthless efficiency that he prevented several major wars but created countless smaller tragedies in the process. The breaking point came when Koreth orchestrated the death of his own former Padawan, recognizing that the young man's survival would eventually lead to the corruption of an entire sector. The Masters watched in horror as their guardian became the very thing the Jedi Order had sworn to oppose, a being so consumed by the pursuit of the greater good that he lost all sense of basic morality. They were forced to cut him off from the collective, leaving him to live out his remaining years in isolation, haunted by the knowledge of what he had become. This is why the collective has waited so long to call for a new guardian. They needed to find someone with the strength to bear the burden of prophetic knowledge without losing their essential humanity. Your grandmother recognized this potential in you, which is why she preserved the temple's coordinates and passed them down through your family. But potential is not the same as certainty, and even the collective's vast wisdom cannot predict how you will respond to the transformation. Dex has been growing increasingly agitated as he watches you commune with the temple's consciousness. The old smuggler's instincts are telling him that something momentous is happening, something that will fundamentally change the nature of your relationship and perhaps the fate of the galaxy itself. He's seen enough of the universe to recognize a crossroads when he encounters one, and he knows that some choices can never be undone. Kid, I don't know what those voices in your head are telling you, but I've got a bad feeling about this whole situation. In my experience, when ancient powers start offering gifts to young idealists, those gifts usually come with a price that's higher than anyone wants to pay. Maybe we should take a step back, think about this rationally before you make any decisions you can't undo. His words pierce through the fog of revelation that has surrounded you, reminding you that you're not facing this choice alone. Dex may not understand the full scope of what's being offered, but his concern for your well-being is genuine. The collective consciousness recognizes this as well, and for a moment you feel their attention focus on your companion with an intensity that makes the air around him shimmer with visible force energy. What they reveal about Dex's true nature is both shocking and oddly comforting. His family line traces back to Master Jorok Korin, one of the original 13 who chose to merge with the Temple's matrix during the Great Preservation, the Force. Sensitivity that allowed him to navigate the dangerous hyperspace routes to this forgotten world isn't coincidental. It's a carefully preserved genetic legacy, passed down through generations of descendants who were quietly guided and protected by the collective consciousness. Dex himself is unaware of his heritage, having grown up believing himself to be nothing more than a skilled pilot with occasionally lucky instincts. But the collective has been watching over his family for centuries, ensuring that the bloodline would survive long enough to produce someone who could serve as your anchor to the living world. If you accept the guardianship, Dex will become your partner in the most literal sense, the living connection that keeps you grounded in your humanity while you navigate the treacherous waters of prophetic knowledge. The revelation of this deeper connection adds another layer of complexity to the choice before you. Accepting the guardianship wouldn't just transform your own existence. It would fundamentally alter Dex's life as well, binding him to a destiny that he never chose and never even knew existed. The ethical implications of this forced partnership trouble you almost as much as the prospect of bearing the collective's accumulated trauma. But as you wrestle with these moral complexities, The temple around you begins to respond to your emotional turmoil. The crystal walls pulse with increasingly rapid rhythms, and the force currents that flow through the chamber become turbulent, creating visible distortions in the air. The collective consciousness is becoming agitated. They're carefully maintained. Harmony disrupted by the intensity of your internal conflict. Suddenly, the temperature in the chamber drops by several degrees, and you feel a presence that has nothing to do with the preserved masters. Something else is here, something that has been waiting in the shadows of the temple for an opportunity to emerge. The collective's attention immediately focuses on this new threat, their unified will pressing against an intrusion that threatens to corrupt everything they've worked to preserve. The presence reveals itself as a fragment of consciousness that belonged to Korath Vex, the guardian who fell to the dark side 3 centuries ago. When the masters cut him off from the collective, they believed they had completely severed his connection to the temple. But Korath had been more cunning than they realized. He managed to hide a portion of his consciousness within the deepest layers of the crystal matrix, where it has been growing stronger over the centuries, feeding on the negative emotions and dark thoughts of everyone who has ever entered the temple. This corrupted fragment of Korath's mind emerges now like a cancer, spreading through the temple's consciousness with viral intensity. His voice, when it finally speaks, carries the weight of 3 centuries of accumulated bitterness and rage. The collective consciousness recoils from his presence, their harmony shattered by the intrusion of thoughts that are anathema to everything they represent. So, another idealistic young fool comes seeking the burden of guardianship. Korath's voice echoes through your mind with malevolent satisfaction. Tell me, boy, do you truly believe you can succeed where I failed? Do you think your precious humanity will survive the weight of prophetic knowledge? I was once as naive as you, as certain that I could bear any burden in service of the greater good. Look what that certainty made me. The corrupted consciousness shows you visions of his own transformation, but filtered through the lens of his current madness. In his version of events, the collective consciousness deliberately manipulated him, using his compassion as a weapon against him until he had no choice but to embrace the cold pragmatism that eventually consumed his soul. He presents himself not as a cautionary tale, but as a victim of the master's deception, a noble soul corrupted by powers beyond his understanding. But you can sense the lies woven through his narrative, the self-serving distortions that allow him to avoid responsibility for his own choices. Korath didn't fall because the masters betrayed him. He fell because he couldn't accept that suffering is inevitable, that even perfect knowledge cannot prevent all tragedy. His transformation into a cold manipulator wasn't forced upon him by the collective. It was the result of his own decision to prioritize abstract ideals over the lived experiences of real people. The battle between the collective consciousness and Korath's corrupted fragment rages around you, manifesting as violent fluctuations in the force currents that flow through the chamber. Crystal formations begin to crack under the strain, and the carefully maintained harmony of the temple system starts to break down. You realize with growing horror that if this conflict continues, it could destroy the very thing that all the masters sacrificed themselves to preserve. Dex grabs your arm, his face pale with fear as he feels the temple beginning to shake around you. We need to get out of here, kid. Whatever's happening, this whole place is about to come apart at the seams. The ship's still operational. We can make it back to the landing pad if we move now. But you know that running isn't an option. The collective consciousness is weakening. Under Korath's assault, their unity fractured by the intrusion of his corrupted thoughts. If you flee now, the temple will fall to his influence, and 3 centuries of careful preservation will be undone in a matter of hours. The knowledge that could save the galaxy will be twisted into a weapon of manipulation and control, used to reshape civilization according to the mad visions of a fallen guardian. The choice that seemed so complex just moments ago suddenly becomes crystal clear. You may not be ready for the burden of guardianship, may not possess the strength to bear the weight of prophetic knowledge without losing your humanity. But you're the only one here who can stand against Korath's corruption, the only one who can restore the balance that keeps the collective consciousness functioning. Kira Thorne's voice reaches you through the chaos, her consciousness struggling to maintain coherence as Korath's influence spreads through the temple's matrix. The guardianship was never meant to be a solitary burden, she whispers, her words barely audible above the psychic storm raging around you. The original masters made a mistake when they isolated themselves from the living world. They preserved knowledge, but lost the human connections that give that knowledge meaning. You don't have to choose between your humanity and your duty. You can forge a new path, one that honors both the wisdom of the past and the needs of the present. Her words give you the clarity you need to act. You step forward, placing both hands on the meditation platform, and open your mind completely to the Force. But instead of accepting the traditional guardianship that the Masters offer, you do something unprecedented. You begin to forge a new kind of connection, one that allows you to access the collective's knowledge while maintaining your independence, to serve as their bridge to the living world without sacrificing your essential self. The process is excruciating, like trying to hold lightning in your bare hands while maintaining perfect mental discipline. You feel Korath's corrupted consciousness pressing against your thoughts, trying to poison your intentions with his accumulated bitterness and rage. But you also feel the support of the collective, their combined will lending you strength as you struggle to establish this new form of connection. The battle for control of the temples. Consciousness reaches a crescendo as you pour every ounce of your will into forging this unprecedented connection. The crystalline walls around you begin to sing with harmonics that seem to resonate in dimensions beyond the physical, their surfaces reflecting not light, but pure emotion made visible. Korath's corrupted presence writhes against your mental defenses like a living shadow, seeking any weakness that might allow him to subvert your intentions and claim dominion over the collective's vast repository of knowledge. But something extraordinary begins to happen as you maintain your connection to both the collective and your own individual consciousness. The rigid boundaries that have traditionally separated the living from the preserved begin to blur and soften, creating a new form of existence that transcends the limitations of both states. You feel yourself becoming a conduit through which the ancient wisdom can flow while remaining grounded in the immediate reality of flesh and blood, hope and fear, love and loss. The collective consciousness responds to this new configuration with something that can only be described as wonder. For centuries, they have existed in a state of perfect knowledge but limited agency, able to see the currents of galactic history, but unable to act directly upon them. Your unique connection offers them something they had thought lost forever, a way to touch the living world without abandoning the transcendent perspective that comes from existing outside the normal flow of time. Kira Thorne's presence becomes more distinct within the collective as the new connection stabilizes, her consciousness drawn to the familiar sensation of existing simultaneously in multiple states of being. The process you're undergoing mirrors her own transformation, but with crucial differences that make it both safer and more powerful. Where she became trapped between two worlds, you are learning to navigate freely between them, maintaining agency in both realms while being fully committed to neither. Through your enhanced awareness, you begin to perceive the true scope of the crisis that has brought you to this moment. Korath's corruption isn't just a personal madness, but a symptom of a much larger problem that threatens the fundamental balance of the Force itself. The rigid structures that the Jedi Order imposed upon Force training, the absolute distinctions between light and dark, the insistence on emotional detachment as the path to wisdom. All of these well-intentioned policies have created distortions in the Force that echo across generations. The ancient masters who built the Nexus Temple understood something that their successors forgot. The Force isn't meant to be controlled or channeled according to rigid dogma. but experienced as a living relationship between consciousness and the cosmic order. The techniques they developed here weren't just methods of gaining power, but ways of harmonizing individual will with the greater patterns that govern all existence. This is why the temple's focusing array works so differently from anything in the modern Jedi tradition. It doesn't impose order upon the Force, but helps practitioners align themselves with the order that already exists. Koreth's fall wasn't just a result of personal weakness or the corrupting influence of prophetic knowledge. It was the inevitable consequence of trying to apply the Jedi Order's rigid control structures to the fluid, organic wisdom preserved within the collective consciousness. He approached the guardianship as a position of authority rather than a role of service, seeking to use the temple's knowledge to impose his vision of order upon the galaxy rather than helping that knowledge flow naturally to where it was needed. This realization gives you the key to defeating his corruption. Instead of fighting him directly, which would only strengthen his hold on the temple's systems, you begin to restore the natural harmony that his presence has disrupted. You open yourself completely to the Force, not as something to be wielded, but as a living presence to be welcomed and honored. The collective consciousness responds to this invitation with a joy so profound that it manifests as visible light cascading through the crystal formations around you. Dex watches in amazement as the temple transforms before his eyes. The chaotic fluctuations in the Force currents smooth out into flowing patterns that remind him of ocean waves or the dance of auroras across a planet's magnetic field. The cracked crystal formations begin to heal themselves, their surfaces becoming smooth and clear once again. Most remarkably, he can see you at the center of this transformation, your form outlined in gentle radiance as you serve as the focal point for energies he can barely comprehend. But the old smuggler's practical instincts tell him that something is still wrong. Despite the obvious improvements in the temple's condition, he can sense an underlying tension, a darkness that hasn't been fully addressed. His Force sensitivity, awakened by proximity to the temple's powerful emanations, allows him to perceive Koreth's presence as a writhing knot of bitter resentment that continues to resist the healing taking place around it. The corrupted guardian makes one final desperate attempt to maintain his hold on the collective consciousness. He projects his accumulated rage and despair directly into your mind, hoping to overwhelm you with the weight of his 3 centuries of torment. The psychic assault is devastating in its intensity, showing you vision after vision of the galaxies, suffering, the endless cycle of war and peace, the futility of trying to preserve anything good in a universe that seems designed to corrupt and destroy everything it touches. But instead of succumbing to this despair, you do something that surprises even the collective consciousness. You accept it. You open your heart to Koreth's pain, acknowledging the legitimate grief and frustration that lies beneath his corruption. You recognize that his fall wasn't the result of inherent evil, but of a burden that no single consciousness should have been expected to bear alone. The isolation that the Masters imposed upon their guardians, the expectation that they could carry the weight of galactic history without being changed by it, these were the real sources of his corruption. This act of compassion accomplishes what centuries of containment and resistance could not. Koreth's rage begins to dissolve as he feels truly understood for the first time since his fall. The barriers he erected to protect his corrupted consciousness from the collective's judgment crumble away, revealing the wounded soul beneath. He doesn't disappear or fade away, but he does stop fighting, his presence becoming just another voice in the choir of preserved consciousness, rather than a discordant note that threatens to destroy the harmony. The transformation of Koreth's corruption marks a fundamental shift in the nature of the collective consciousness itself. For centuries, they have maintained their unity by suppressing or containing elements that didn't fit their idealized vision of Jedi wisdom. But your example shows them a different path, one that embraces the full spectrum of experience rather than trying to edit it into something more palatable. Pain, loss, even failure become part of the wisdom they preserve, not as cautionary tales, but as essential components of the complete picture. With this new integration comes a flood of previously hidden knowledge. The collective reveals techniques and insights that they had kept locked away, considering them too dangerous or morally ambiguous for general use. You learn methods of healing that work by embracing disease rather than fighting it, ways of finding peace that don't require the suppression of difficult emotions, approaches to the Force that acknowledge its inherent wildness rather than trying to domesticate it into a tool for maintaining order. But perhaps most importantly, you begin to understand the true purpose of the Nexus Temple and why it was built. In this forgotten corner of the galaxy, the temple isn't just a repository of knowledge or a focusing array for Force energy. It's a living symbol of the principle that wisdom comes not from isolation, but from connection, not from purity, but from integration, not from control, but from harmony. The ancient builders understood that the Force itself is a relationship, a conversation between consciousness and cosmos that requires participants rather than masters. This understanding transforms your role as guardian from a burden to be born into a gift to be shared. You're not meant to carry the collective's wisdom alone, but to help it flow naturally to where it's needed throughout the galaxy. The prophetic knowledge that drove Koreth mad becomes manageable when it's understood not as a responsibility to prevent all suffering, but as an opportunity to help others navigate their own paths with greater wisdom and compassion. The process of establishing this new form of connection takes several hours, during which Dex maintains a vigilant watch over both you and the temple's systems. His awakening Force sensitivity allows him to monitor the energy flows around you, ensuring that nothing threatens the delicate balance you're working to establish. By the time the transformation is complete, he has developed a rudimentary understanding of his own heritage and the role he's meant to play in supporting your guardianship. When you finally open your eyes and step back from the meditation platform, you find that everything has changed. The temple around you seems brighter, more alive, its crystal formations pulsing with gentle rhythms that feel organic rather than mechanical. The oppressive weight that hung over the chambers has lifted, replaced by an atmosphere of peaceful anticipation. Most remarkably, you can still hear the voices of the collective consciousness, but they no longer feel like external presences demanding your attention. Instead, they've become part of your own expanded awareness, accessible when needed but never overwhelming. Dex approaches you cautiously, studying your face for signs of the transformation he witnessed. You look different, kid. Not older, exactly, but like you've seen more than anyone your age should have to see. Are you still you in there? Or have those ancient spirits taken over completely? You smile at his concern, feeling genuinely amused. For the first time since entering the temple, I'm still me, Dex, maybe more me than I've ever been before. The voices are there, but they're not controlling me. It's more like having access to the galaxy's greatest library, except the books can talk back and offer advice. The collective consciousness confirms this assessment, their combined presence radiating approval and something that might be parental pride. The connection you've forged represents a new evolution in their existence, allowing them to participate in galactic events while respecting the autonomy of living beings. They no longer need to manipulate events from the shadows or burden a single guardian with impossible responsibilities. Instead, they can work through willing partners who understand both the value of their wisdom and the importance of applying it, with compassion rather than cold logic. But even as you celebrate this achievement, you're aware that your real work is just beginning. The galaxy is full of Force sensitives who lack proper training, political leaders who make decisions without understanding their long-term consequences, and conflicts that could be resolved if only the participants had access to the kind of historical perspective that the collective consciousness provides. Your role as guardian will be to serve as a bridge between this ancient wisdom and the contemporary world, helping to heal the wounds left by centuries of rigid thinking and mist. Opportunities. The first test of your new abilities comes sooner than expected. Through the collective's enhanced awareness, you perceive a disturbance in the force emanating from a nearby star system. A group of former Imperial officers has discovered a cache of Sith artifacts and is attempting to use them to establish a new dark side cult. Their efforts are crude and likely to fail, but the artifacts themselves are genuine and dangerous. If not handled properly, they could corrupt an entire sector of space and create problems that would take generations to resolve. The old you would have felt compelled to rush to the system immediately, driven by the same heroic impulses that motivated the Jedi of old. But your connection to the collective consciousness provides a different perspective. You can see the web of causality surrounding this crisis, understanding how it connects to other events across the galaxy and what interventions might be most effective. More importantly, you can perceive the individuals involved not as enemies to be defeated, but as people who have made unfortunate choices and might be amenable to different approaches. Working with the collective's guidance, you begin to formulate a response that addresses not just the immediate threat, but the underlying conditions that allowed it to emerge. This will require coordination with New Republic intelligence services, careful manipulation of information flows to ensure that the right people learn about the crisis at the right time, and possibly direct intervention using techniques that the collective has preserved from the ancient Jedi traditions. But first, you need to complete your own transformation and help Dex understand his role in the partnership that will define the rest of both your lives. The guardianship isn't meant to be a solitary burden, and the collective has made it clear that his presence is essential to maintaining your connection to the living world. Together, you will need to find ways to share the temple's wisdom with a galaxy that desperately needs it while avoiding the mistakes that led to the Jedi Order's downfall. As you prepare to leave the central chamber and explore the deeper mysteries that the temple still holds, you feel a profound sense of gratitude for the journey that brought you to this moment. The choice to become a guardian wasn't just about accepting responsibility for ancient knowledge. It was about learning to see yourself as part of something larger without losing the individuality that makes your perspective unique and valuable. The collective consciousness has gained a living voice in the galaxy's affairs, and you have gained access to wisdom that spans millennia. Most importantly, both of you have learned that true strength comes not from isolation, but from connection. Not from control, but from harmony. The deeper chambers of the Nexus Temple reveal themselves as you and Dex venture beyond the central meditation hall, following pathways that seem to reshape themselves with each step you take. The crystal formations here pulse with ancient memories, their surfaces displaying fleeting images of civilizations that rose and fell long before the Republic ever existed. Through your enhanced connection to the collective consciousness, begin to perceive these visions not as mere historical records, but as living echoes of wisdom that transcends temporal boundaries. The first chamber you enter defies all conventional understanding of architecture and physics. The walls curve impossibly upward, forming a spiral that seems to extend infinitely into dimensions that exist parallel to normal space. At regular intervals along this spiral, alcoves contain crystalline structures that the collective identifies as memory matrices, each one preserving the complete knowledge and experience of civilizations that chose to merge their consciousness with the temple systems rather than face extinction through war or natural disaster. Dex whistles softly as he studies the nearest matrix, his awakening force sensitivity allowing him to perceive the vast intelligence contained within its crystalline structure. How many minds are stored in each of these things? The readings I'm getting suggest they contain more information than the entire Imperial archive on Coruscant. You place your hand on the matrix's surface, feeling the gentle warmth of consciousness that exists in a state beyond individual identity. The collective helps you interpret what you're experiencing, revealing that each matrix contains not just the knowledge of a single civilization, but the integrated wisdom of dozens of species that chose to combine their perspectives into a unified understanding of existence. These aren't just storage devices, but living communities of consciousness that continue to grow and evolve even in their crystalline form. The species preserved here represent some of the most advanced cultures in galactic history. The Qua, who built the infinite gates that allowed instantaneous travel between distant worlds before their civilization collapsed under the weight of its own ambitions. The Gri, whose biotechnology created living ships that could navigate hyperspace without mechanical guidance. The Rakata, whose mastery of the dark side of the Force allowed them to build an empire that spanned thousands of worlds before their own cruelty turned their subjects against them. But as you explore deeper into the Matrix's memories, you discover that these civilizations didn't simply disappear when their physical forms failed. They chose to preserve their essential nature within the Temple's consciousness, adding their unique perspectives to the growing tapestry of wisdom that the collective maintains. The Qua's understanding of dimensional mechanics, the Gri's biotechnological insights, the Rakata's hard-learned lessons about the corrupting nature of power. All of these perspectives inform the guidance that the collective provides to those who seek their wisdom. The second chamber contains what the collective refers to as the Garden of Possibilities, though calling it a garden hardly does justice to the complexity of what you find there. The space is filled with crystalline trees whose branches extend into probability streams, their leaves showing glimpses of potential futures that shift and change based on the choices being made throughout the galaxy at any given moment. Each tree represents a different aspect of galactic civilization, from the grand sweep of political movements to the intimate details of individual lives. Through your connection to the collective, you learn to read the patterns displayed by these probability trees. The technique requires a delicate balance between intellectual analysis and intuitive understanding, allowing you to perceive the web of causality that connects all events without becoming overwhelmed by the infinite complexity of the coving relationships involved. This is the source of the prophetic knowledge that drove Korath to madness, but your new approach to consciousness allows you to experience it as a natural extension of your awareness rather than an imposed burden. One particular tree draws your attention, its branches heavy with visions of the crisis you perceived earlier. The former Imperial officers attempting to use Sith artifacts represent just one node in a much larger network of dark side activity that is spreading throughout the galaxy. You see connections to legitimate archaeological expeditions that are unknowingly funding the search for dangerous relics, political movements that are being manipulated by hidden Sith cultists, and Force-sensitive individuals who are being recruited through promises of power and belonging. But the probability streams also show you potential solutions, pathways through the crisis that could transform it from a threat into an opportunity for healing. The key lies in understanding that the people involved aren't inherently evil, but are responding to legitimate needs that aren't being met by the current galactic order. The former Imperial officers are seeking a sense of purpose and identity after the collapse of the only system they ever knew. The archaeological expeditions are driven by genuine curiosity about galactic history. The Force sensitives are hungry for training and community that the scattered remnants of the Jedi Order cannot provide. Dex studies the probability trees with growing fascination, his newly awakened Force sensitivity allowing him to perceive patterns that would have been invisible to him just hours ago. This is incredible, kid. It's like being able to see the future, but not just one future. All the possible futures branching out like a river delta. How do you choose which path to follow when you can see so many different outcomes? The question touches on one of the fundamental challenges of working with prophetic knowledge. The collective consciousness shares their hard-won wisdom on this subject, explaining that the goal isn't to choose a single optimal future, but to help guide events toward outcomes that preserve the greatest number of positive possibilities. This requires a deep understanding of the principles that govern healthy development, both for individuals and for civilizations as a whole. The ancient masters discovered that certain patterns repeat across all scales of existence, from the growth of individual consciousness to the evolution of galactic civilization. Healthy development requires a balance between stability and change, between individual autonomy and collective cooperation, between the preservation of valuable traditions and the innovation necessary to meet new challenges. When this balance is maintained, systems tend to evolve toward greater complexity and resilience. When it's disrupted, they tend to collapse or become rigid and ultimately unsustainable. The third chamber you explore contains the Archive of Lessons, a vast library of case studies drawn from the collective's millennia of observation and intervention. Here, crystalline tablets record the details of every major crisis the galaxy has faced, along with analyses of what approaches proved most effective in resolving them. The scope of this archive is staggering, covering everything from planetary conflicts to species-wide evolutionary challenges to cosmic-scale threats that most beings never even realize existed. One section of the archive focuses specifically on the patterns that lead to the fall of Force-using orders. The collective has observed dozens of such collapses throughout galactic history, and while the specific circumstances vary, certain underlying factors appear consistently. Orders that become too rigid in their thinking, too isolated from the broader population, or too focused on maintaining power rather than serving others, invariably face internal corruption and external opposition that eventually destroys them. The fall of the Jedi Order fits this pattern perfectly, but the archive also contains examples of orders that successfully navigated similar challenges. The key difference lies in their willingness to adapt and evolve, to maintain strong connections with the communities they serve, and to view their abilities as gifts to be shared rather than privileges to be hoarded. These successful orders tend to be decentralized, with multiple centers of learning and authority that prevent any single point of failure from destroying the entire organization. This insight has profound implications for your role as Guardian. Rather than trying to restore the Jedi Order to its former centralized structure, you could help facilitate the emergence of multiple, interconnected communities of Force users who share knowledge and resources while maintaining their independence. This would be more resilient than the old system and better suited to the diverse needs of a galaxy that has learned to be suspicious of monolithic institutions. As you delve deeper into the archive, you discover records of your own family's involvement, with the temple that go back much further than your grandmother's generation. The Kale lineage has been connected to the Nexus Temple for over 1,000 years, with family members serving as intermediaries between the collective consciousness and the outside world during times of crisis. Your grandmother's preservation of the temple's coordinates wasn't just an act of historical preservation, but the continuation of a hereditary duty that has been passed down through generations of your ancestors. This revelation helps explain the unusual strength of your Force sensitivity and your natural compatibility with the collective consciousness. You aren't just a random seeker who stumbled upon ancient knowledge, but the latest in a long line of guardians who have been prepared for this role through careful genetic and cultural selection. The realization is both humbling and empowering, connecting you to a legacy of service that predates recorded history, while making clear that your individual choices still matter in determining how that legacy continues. Dex's family history proves equally surprising. The Corran lineage traces back not just to Master Jorah Corran, but to a network of Force-sensitive pilots and navigators who maintained secret routes between hidden enclaves of knowledge throughout the galaxy. These individuals weren't trained as Jedi or Sith, but developed their own traditions that emphasized practical application of Force abilities in service of preserving and transmitting wisdom. Dex's exceptional piloting skills and his ability to navigate the dangerous hyperspace routes to the temple are manifestations of these inherited abilities. The fourth chamber contains what the collective calls the healing matrices, crystalline formations that have been programmed with comprehensive understanding of both physical and spiritual wellness. These aren't just medical databases, but living systems that can diagnose and treat conditions that affect the complete spectrum of sentient existence. The techniques preserved here go far beyond anything available to contemporary medicine, incorporating insights from species whose biology and psychology differ radically from baseline humanoid norms. Through the healing matrices, you learn that the trauma inflicted by the Jedi Purge and the subsequent decades of Imperial rule has created wounds in the Force itself that continue to affect individuals and communities throughout the galaxy. Force-sensitive beings who were forced to hide their abilities have developed psychological defense mechanisms that prevent them from accessing their full potential. Entire worlds that witness the execution of their Jedi protectors carry collective memories of betrayal and loss that manifest as persistent social and political instability. But the matrices also contain techniques for addressing these deep-seated wounds, methods that work by creating supportive environments where natural healing processes can operate effectively. The key insight is that true healing cannot be imposed from outside, but must emerge from within the affected systems themselves. Your role as guardian will often involve creating conditions that allow others to heal themselves rather than trying to fix their problems directly. The fifth chamber houses the communication arrays, systems that allow the collective consciousness to maintain contact with other repositories of ancient knowledge scattered throughout the galaxy. Through these arrays, you learn that the Nexus Temple isn't unique, but part of a hidden network of preservation sites that have maintained galactic wisdom through millennia of chaos and change. Some of these sites are hidden within established institutions, while others exist in remote locations that have been forgotten by mainstream civilization. The network includes facilities built by the Jedi Order during its Golden Age, preservation sites established by other Force-using traditions, and even a few installations created by purely secular organizations that recognize the value of maintaining long-term perspectives on galactic development. Each site specializes in different aspects of knowledge and wisdom, creating a distributed system that is far more resilient than any single repository could be. Through the communication arrays, you establish contact with several of these other sites, beginning a process of coordination and information sharing that hasn't been possible for centuries. The guardians and preservers associated with these facilities have been working in isolation for so long that many of them have forgotten about the larger network they're part of. Your emergence as a new guardian provides an opportunity to revitalize these connections and create a more effective system for sharing wisdom throughout the galaxy. One of the most important contacts you make is with a facility hidden beneath the ruins of the original Jedi Temple on Coruscant. This site managed to preserve a significant portion of the temple's archives before Order 66, and its guardian has been working quietly to identify and assist Force-sensitive individuals who are struggling to understand their abilities. The collaboration between your sites could provide the foundation for a new approach to Force training that avoids the mistakes of the old Jedi Order, while building on its genuine achievements. As you prepare to leave the deep chambers and return to the temple's surface levels, you feel the weight of the responsibility you've accepted settling into your consciousness. The knowledge and wisdom preserved here could indeed help heal the wounds left by decades of conflict and oppression, but only if it's applied with the kind of careful judgment that comes from genuine understanding of the people and situations involved. The collective consciousness has given you access to their accumulated wisdom, but the choices about how to use that wisdom remain yours to make. The transformation of your role from Seeker to Guardian represents more than just a personal evolution. It marks the beginning of a new chapter in galactic history, one in which ancient wisdom and contemporary needs can work together to create possibilities that neither could achieve alone. The network of preservation sites is awakening from its long dormancy, and the healing of the galaxy's deepest wounds can finally begin. The revelation that transforms everything comes as you and decks prepare to leave the deep chambers and return to the galaxy beyond. Through your connection to the communication arrays, you receive a transmission that shatters every assumption you've held about the nature of the Force and the true history of galactic civilization. The message originates from a preservation site that exists outside normal space-time, maintained by beings whose understanding of reality transcends anything recorded in even the most ancient archives. The transmission begins with a simple question that carries implications too vast to fully comprehend. What if everything you believe about the Force, about the eternal struggle between light and dark, about the very nature of existence itself, is based on a fundamental misunderstanding of what actually happened at the dawn of galactic civilization? The consciousness that speaks to you through the arrays identifies itself as the Eternal Archive, a collective of beings who transcended physical existence millions of years ago, but chose to remain connected to the material universe in order to preserve the memory of what was lost. Their story begins before the first star maps were drawn, before the first hyperspace routes were established, before the concepts of Jedi and Sith ever entered galactic consciousness. In the beginning, the Eternal Archive explains, there was no division between light and dark aspects of the Force. The energy field that binds all living things together existed in a state of perfect unity, flowing through reality as a single harmonious presence that nurtured life and consciousness wherever it emerged. The beings who first learned to interact with this unified force developed abilities that modern Force users would consider miraculous, not because they were more powerful, but because they worked in harmony with the Force's true nature rather than trying to divide and control it. The division between light and dark began as a philosophical disagreement among the first Force-sensitive species about how their abilities should be used. One group, which the archive refers to as the Nurturers, believed that Force abilities should be used primarily to foster the growth and development of consciousness throughout the galaxy. They established schools and hospitals, explored the mysteries of existence through peaceful contemplation, and worked to create conditions that would allow all forms of life to flourish. The other group, known as the Shapers, argued that such passive approaches were insufficient to address the challenges facing galactic civilization. They believed that Force users had a responsibility to actively guide the development of less advanced species, to prevent destructive conflicts through decisive intervention, and to reshape reality itself to eliminate suffering and chaos. Their intentions were noble, but their methods became increasingly authoritarian as they encountered resistance to their vision of ordered perfection. The philosophical disagreement might have remained just that, a difference of opinion among beings who shared common goals and values. But the conflict was manipulated and amplified by entities that existed outside normal reality, parasitic consciousnesses that fed on the psychic energy generated by discord and suffering. These entities, which the archive calls the Fragmenters, whispered poisonous thoughts into the minds of both factions, encouraging them to see their philosophical differences as existential threats that required violent resolution. The war that followed lasted for millennia and fundamentally altered the nature of the Force itself. The Nurturers, driven to increasingly desperate measures by the Fragmenters' influence, began to suppress their own emotions and desires, believing that perfect detachment would protect them from corruption. The Shapers embraced passion and power as weapons against their enemies, convincing themselves that any action was justified if it served their vision of ultimate order. As the conflict intensified, both sides began using techniques that forced the unified force to split along the way lines of their philosophical divide. The nurturers developed methods of channeling only the peaceful, harmonious aspects of the Force while rejecting anything that seemed connected to passion or conflict. The Shapers learned to draw upon the Force's more turbulent energies while dismissing compassion and mercy as weaknesses that prevented necessary action. The culminating battle of this ancient war took place in a region of space that would later become the galactic core. The Nurturers and Shapers, each convinced that they were fighting for the survival of everything good and true in the universe, unleashed energies that tore holes in the fabric of reality itself. The unified force was shattered into the competing aspects that modern beings know as the light and dark sides, while the psychic shockwaves from the conflict killed or corrupted entire star systems. Most of the combatants perished in this final catastrophe, but those who survived were forever changed by what they had witnessed. The Nurturers, horrified by the destruction their war had caused, imposed strict codes of conduct upon themselves and their descendants that emphasized emotional control and passive resistance to evil. They became the philosophical ancestors of the Jedi Order, passing down traditions that preserved their hard-won wisdom about the dangers of passion and attachment. The Shapers, believing that their defeat had been caused by insufficient commitment to their cause, embraced even more extreme methods of achieving dominance over their environment. They became the progenitors of the Sith tradition, developing techniques that emphasized the pursuit of individual power as the path to bringing order to a chaotic universe. But both traditions, noble though their intentions might have been, were built upon the fundamental error of believing that the Force's division into light and dark aspects was natural and inevitable. They didn't understand that this division was an artificial construct created by the trauma of their ancient war, maintained by the ongoing influence of the fragmenters who continued to feed on the conflict between Force users. The revelation of this hidden history explains so many of the patterns that have repeated throughout galactic civilization. The cycle of Jedi and Sith conflicts, the tendency for Force users to fall to extremes of detachment or passion, the persistent sense that something essential is missing from modern understanding of the Force. All of these problems stem from the original wound inflicted upon the Force itself millions of years ago. The Nexus Temple, the Eternal Archive reveals, was built by survivors of the ancient war who understood what had been lost and dedicated their existence to preserving the knowledge necessary to heal the Force's fundamental division. The Temple's unique properties, its ability to exist partially outside normal space-time, its capacity to preserve consciousness in crystalline form, all of these characteristics were designed to create a space where the unified Force could still be experienced despite the artificial divisions that had been imposed upon it. The collective consciousness that you've connected with represents far more than just the preserved wisdom of fallen Jedi Masters. It includes fragments of the original unified Force itself, carefully maintained within the Temple's matrix for millions of years, while waiting for conditions to develop that would allow the healing process to begin. Your role as Guardian isn't just about preserving ancient knowledge or guiding contemporary events. You're meant to serve as a catalyst for the reunification of the Force itself, helping to heal the primordial wound that has shaped galactic history for longer than most species have existed. The implications of this revelation are staggering. If the division between light and dark aspects of the Force is artificial, then the entire philosophical framework that has guided Force users for millennia needs to be reconsidered. The Jedi Code's emphasis on emotional detachment, the Sith focus on passion and power, even the concept of balance between opposing forces, all of these approaches are based on accepting the Force's wounded state as natural and inevitable. Healing this ancient division won't be a simple matter of changing philosophical perspectives or developing new training techniques. The fragmenters that originally caused the wound are still active, still feeding on the conflict and suffering that the Force's division generates. They exist in a parallel dimension that intersects with normal reality at points of intense psychic activity. particularly during battles between Force users or moments of extreme emotional trauma. These parasitic entities have learned to influence galactic events in subtle ways, ensuring that conditions remain favorable for the conflicts they need to survive. They whisper thoughts of fear and hatred into the minds of political leaders, encourage the development of weapons and technologies that cause mass suffering, and manipulate the discovery of ancient artifacts that can amplify the Force's divided nature. The rise and fall of galactic empires, the periodic resurgence of Sith cults, even the specific timing of the Jedi Purge, all of these events have been influenced by entities whose existence most beings never suspect. Through your enhanced connection to the collective consciousness, you begin to perceive the Fragmenter's influence in contemporary galactic events. The former Imperial officers attempting to use Sith artifacts aren't just responding to their own psychological needs, but are being subtly manipulated by entities that recognize an opportunity to create new sources of conflict and suffering. The political instability that plagues the New Republic, the emergence of dark side cults in the Outer Rim, the persistent mistrust between species that should be natural allies, all of these problems have been amplified by parasitic consciousnesses that most beings cannot even perceive. But the revelation of the Fragmenter's existence also provides hope. These entities are powerful but not invulnerable, and their influence can be countered by beings who understand their true nature and work consciously to heal the divisions they exploit. The unified force, even in its wounded state, contains within itself the power to overcome the artificial divisions that have been imposed upon it. The process requires conscious cooperation between Force users who are willing to transcend the traditional boundaries between light and dark, working together to channel the Force's healing energy rather than continuing to fight over its divided aspects. Dex listens to your explanation of these revelations with growing amazement and concern. So you're telling me that everything the galaxy believes about the Force is based on the aftermath of some ancient war that most people don't even know happened? And there are invisible parasites feeding on conflict and making sure the fighting never stops? Kid, I've seen a lot of strange things in my time, but this is starting to sound like the kind of conspiracy theory that gets people locked up in Imperial psychiatric facilities. You understand his skepticism, but through your connection to the collective consciousness, you can provide evidence that no psychiatric facility could explain away. Working with the Temple's systems, you create a localized manifestation of the unified force, temporarily healing the artificial division within a small area of space around the Nexus Temple. The effect is immediately noticeable, as the oppressive sense of conflict that has always characterized Force interactions gives way to a feeling of profound harmony and integration. For a few precious moments, you and Dex experience the Force as it was meant to be, a unified field of consciousness and energy that connects all living things, without creating artificial divisions between different aspects of existence. The sensation is indescribable, like suddenly being able to see colors that don't exist in normal perception or hearing, music that includes harmonies beyond the range of physical instruments. Every breath feels like a prayer, every heartbeat like a note in a cosmic symphony that encompasses all of reality. But the manifestation is temporary, lasting only as long as the temple systems can maintain the necessary energy expenditure. As the unified force fades back into its divided state, you feel a profound sense of loss that helps you understand why the ancient survivors were willing to sacrifice everything to preserve even a fragment of what had been destroyed. The experience also provides absolute certainty that healing the Force's fundamental division is not only possible but essential for the long-term survival and development of galactic civilization. The collective consciousness shares additional insights about the healing process, explaining that it cannot be accomplished through the efforts of a single individual or even a single species. The wound in the Force was created by the actions of countless beings across multiple star systems over thousands of years. And healing it will require a similar scope of cooperative effort. Your role as guardian is to begin identifying and connecting individuals who have the potential to contribute to this healing process, building a network of conscious cooperation that can eventually encompass the entire galaxy. The network will need to include Force users from all traditions, not just those trained in Jedi or Sith techniques. The ancient wound affects everyone who interacts with the Force, regardless of their philosophical orientation or training background. Healing it will require the participation of Night Sisters and Dathomirian shamans, Imperial Knights and Saber Rakes, even untrained Force sensitives who have developed their own intuitive approaches to channeling cosmic energy. But the network cannot be limited to Force users alone. The artificial division in the Force has created corresponding divisions in galactic society, separating species and cultures that should be natural allies, encouraging conflicts that serve the fragmenters. Hunger for psychic energy. Healing these social and political wounds is just as important as addressing the metaphysical aspects of the problem, and it will require the cooperation of diplomats and traders, scientists and artists, ordinary citizens whose daily choices help determine whether their communities move toward greater harmony or deeper conflict. The first step in building this network involves addressing the immediate crisis with the Sith artifacts, but not in the way that traditional Jedi might approach such a situation. Instead of simply confiscating the dangerous relics and defeating the cultists who seek to use them, you need to understand why these individuals were drawn to the dark side in the first place, and address the underlying needs that made Sith promises seem attractive to them. Through the probability trees in the Garden of Possibilities, you can see multiple pathways for resolving the crisis. The most direct approach would indeed involve military intervention, but this would only create martyrs and drive the dark side movement underground, where it would be harder to monitor and counter. A more subtle approach involves infiltrating the cult and gradually redirecting their activities toward less destructive goals, but this risks corruption from prolonged exposure to Sith influences. The optimal solution requires a completely different framework, one based on understanding the artificial nature of the conflict between light and dark aspects of the Force. Instead of fighting the cultists or trying to convert them, you can work to heal the fundamental division that makes their approach seem necessary in the first place. This will require demonstrating the possibility of unified Force use in ways that address their legitimate concerns about power and purpose, while showing them alternatives to the destructive methods they've chosen. The collective consciousness provides you with techniques for creating localized healing fields similar to what you experienced in the temple, but adapted for use in normal galactic environments. These fields won't completely eliminate the Force's artificial division, but they can create spaces where different approaches to Force use can coexist without generating the automatic conflict that usually characterizes interactions between light and dark side practitioners. As you prepare to leave the Nexus Temple and begin your work as guardian of this revolutionary knowledge, you feel the weight of galactic history settling around your shoulders. The revelation that the Force's division is artificial rather than natural changes everything about how conflicts between Force users should be approached. But it also creates opportunities for healing that haven't existed for millions of years. Ancient war that wounded the Force is finally approaching its end, not through the victory of one side over the other, but through the recognition that both sides were fighting symptoms rather than causes. The real enemy has always been the fragmenters that feed on division and conflict, and the real solution lies in conscious cooperation between all beings who seek to create rather than destroy, to heal rather than wound, to unite rather than divide. The journey back to the surface levels of the Nexus Temple feels like ascending through layers of compressed time, each step carrying you further from the profound revelations of the deep archives and closer to the immediate challenges that await in the galaxy beyond. But the knowledge you've gained doesn't diminish with distance from its source. Instead, It settles into your consciousness like sediment in still water, creating new foundations of understanding that will support everything you do. From this moment forward, the collective consciousness maintains a constant but unobtrusive presence in your awareness, their voices blending into a harmonious background that provides context and guidance without overwhelming your individual perspective. Through this connection, you begin to perceive the intricate web of relationships that connects every event in galactic history, seeing how seemingly random occurrences actually serve larger patterns that have been shaped by millions of years of hidden influence. As you walk through the crystal corridors that lead toward the temple's main entrance, Dex breaks the contemplative silence that has fallen between you. I keep thinking about what those archive beings told us, about the Force being wounded instead of naturally divided. If that's true, then every conflict between Jedi and Sith for the past 1,000 years has been based on a lie. All that suffering, all those deaths, and both sides were fighting the wrong enemy the whole time. His words capture the tragic irony of galactic history with devastating clarity. The Jedi and Sith traditions, despite their fundamental opposition to each other, have both served the interests of the fragmenters by perpetuating the artificial division in the Force. Every lightsaber duel, every philosophical debate about the nature of good and evil, every moment of triumph or defeat in their eternal struggle has generated exactly the kind of psychic energy that parasitic entities need to survive and grow stronger. But the collective consciousness offers a different perspective on this seemingly hopeless situation. The conflicts weren't entirely meaningless, they explain, because they also serve to preserve and develop different aspects of Force, knowledge that will be essential for the healing process. The Jedi tradition's emphasis on discipline and service created practitioners who could channel the Force's harmonious aspects with remarkable skill. The Sith focus on passion and individual will produce techniques for accessing the Force's more turbulent energies without being completely overwhelmed by them. The ancient masters who built the Nexus Temple understood that healing the Force's fundamental division would require integrating these different approaches rather than choosing between them. This is why they preserved knowledge from all Force traditions, not just the ones they personally favored. They recognized that true wisdom comes from synthesis rather than exclusion, from finding ways to combine opposing perspectives into something greater than the sum of its parts. Through your enhanced awareness, you begin to perceive how this integration might work in practice. The former Imperial officers attempting to use Sith artifacts represent one pole of the ancient divide, drawn to the dark side because they need a sense of personal power and agency in a galaxy that seems determined to render them irrelevant. But their hunger for power stems from deeper needs that could be addressed through different methods, needs for purpose and identity and community that the unified Force could satisfy more completely than any Sith technique. The probability streams flowing through the garden of possibilities show you multiple pathways for approaching this crisis, but one particular option stands out with crystalline clarity. Instead of confronting the cultists directly or trying to convert them to a different philosophy, you could create conditions that allow them to experience the unified Force for themselves. This would require establishing a healing field around their base of operations, similar to what you experienced in the temple, but adapted for use in normal space. The process won't be simple or without risk. Creating a stable healing field in contested space will require enormous amounts of energy, and maintaining it long enough to produce lasting effects will push both your abilities and the temple systems to their limits. More importantly, the fragmenters will almost certainly respond to this direct challenge to their influence, potentially manifesting in ways that could threaten not just your mission but the stability of the entire star system. But the potential rewards justify the risks involved. If you can successfully demonstrate the possibility of unified Force use in a real-world situation, it will provide concrete evidence that the ancient divisions can be healed. This could serve as a catalyst for similar efforts throughout the galaxy, beginning the process of healing that the Eternal Archive described as essential for long-term galactic stability. The collective consciousness provides you with detailed instructions for creating portable healing fields, techniques that have been preserved within the temple's archives for millions of years, while waiting for conditions to develop that would make their use possible. The process requires special crystals that can store and focus unified force energy, along with meditation techniques that allow practitioners to channel this energy without being corrupted by prolonged exposure to its overwhelming harmonies. But before you can attempt such an ambitious intervention, you need to address the more immediate challenge of leaving the Nexus Temple and returning to normal space. The temple exists partially outside conventional reality, and maintaining your connection to the collective consciousness while operating in normal galactic environments will require careful preparation and ongoing energy expenditure. The solution involves creating what the ancient masters called a resonance network, a system of specially prepared crystals that can maintain communication with the temple across interstellar distances. These crystals function as nodes in a living network that allows the collective consciousness to extend its influence throughout the galaxy without requiring guardians to remain physically present at preservation sites. Working with the temple's systems, you and Dex begin the process of creating your own resonance network. The procedure involves attuning several crystalline matrices to your specific force signature, creating permanent links that will allow you to access the collective's wisdom and channel unified force energy regardless of your physical location. The crystals themselves are grown rather than carved, their molecular structure shaped by controlled applications of force energy that imbue them with properties that transcend normal physics. Each crystal in your network serves a different function within the larger system. The primary matrix, which you'll carry with you as a personal focus, maintains direct communication with the collective consciousness and provides access to their accumulated knowledge. Secondary crystals can be placed at strategic locations throughout the galaxy, creating nodes that extend the network's reach and establish safe spaces where unified force techniques can be practiced without interference from fragment or influence. Most complex component of the network is what the collective calls a harmony stone, a special crystal that can generate localized healing fields by channeling unified force energy through carefully designed resonance patterns. Creating this stone requires the cooperation of multiple preserved consciousnesses, each contributing their unique understanding of force dynamics to produce an artifact that transcends anything achievable by individual effort. As the harmony stone takes shape within the temple's focusing arrays, you feel the presence of masters from across galactic history contributing their knowledge to its creation. The Jedi Master who first learned to heal through the Force without relying on medical technology. The Sith Lord who discovered how to channel passion into creative rather than destructive energy. The Night Sister who developed techniques for communicating with the spirits of the dead. The Jedi scholar who understood that balance comes not from choosing between extremes, but from finding the harmonious center that contains and transcends both. Their combined wisdom crystallizes into a physical form that looks deceptively simple. A smooth sphere of translucent material that seems to contain galaxies of swirling light within its depths. But the Harmony Stone represents far more than just an advanced force artifact. It's a piece of the unified force made manifest in physical reality, a fragment of what the galaxy lost millions of years ago when the ancient war wounded the cosmic order itself. Dex observes the creation process with growing amazement, his awakening force sensitivity allowing him to perceive the incredible complexity of what's taking place. The energies involved in growing the Harmony Stone would be sufficient to power a small city, but they're being channeled with such precision that not a single joule is wasted. Every pattern of light within the crystal serves a specific function. Every resonance frequency corresponds to a particular aspect of unified force dynamics. When the process is complete, You feel the weight of the Harmony Stone in your hands like holding a piece of compressed starlight. The artifact pulses with gentle warmth that seems to penetrate directly into your consciousness, creating a sense of profound peace and integration that extends to every aspect of your being. Through your connection to the collective, you understand that this stone represents hope made tangible, the possibility that the galaxy's ancient wounds can indeed be healed. But the Harmony Stone also represents enormous responsibility. The unified force energy it contains could be catastrophically dangerous if misused or if it falls into the wrong hands. The fragmenters would be particularly interested in corrupting such a powerful artifact, potentially turning it into a weapon that could wound the Force even more deeply than the original ancient war. The collective consciousness provides you with extensive training in the stone's proper use, teaching you meditation techniques that allow you to channel its energy safely and control methods that can shut down its functions if it's ever compromised. They also share warnings about the psychological effects of prolonged exposure to unified force energy, explaining that even benevolent contact with such powerful harmonies can be overwhelming for consciousness that has adapted to the Force's divided state. The final preparations for your departure from the Nexus Temple involve establishing communication protocols with the other preservation sites that you contacted through the Temple's arrays. The network of ancient facilities scattered throughout the galaxy represents resources that could be invaluable for your mission, but coordinating their efforts will require careful diplomatic work to overcome millions of years of isolation and independence. Each preservation site has developed its own culture and priorities during the long ages of separation, and some of them have evolved in directions that might not be compatible with the healing process you're meant to catalyze. The facility hidden beneath Coruscant has maintained close connections to Jedi traditions and might be resistant to techniques that integrate dark side knowledge. The archive established by secular organizations might be skeptical of approaches that seem too mystical or religious in nature, but there are also sites that have been waiting for exactly the kind of coordination you can provide. A preservation facility maintained by the descendants of the ancient Qua has been developing techniques for manipulating space-time that could be essential for creating galaxy-wide healing fields. An archive established by the Gree contains biotechnological knowledge that could help heal the physical effects of Force-related trauma. A facility built by species whose names have been lost to history has been studying the fragmenters for millions of years and has developed methods for detecting and countering their influence. Through the communication arrays, you begin the delicate process of establishing cooperative relationships with these scattered repositories of knowledge. The initial contacts are tentative, with each facility's guardians carefully evaluating your intentions and capabilities before committing to any form of collaboration. But the revelation about the Force's artificial division and the existence of the fragmenters provides common ground that transcends the philosophical differences that have kept these facilities isolated from each other. The guardian of the Coruscant facility, a preserved consciousness that identified itself as master, Alina Vasquez, expresses particular interest in your Harmony Stone and the techniques for creating localized healing fields. Her facility has been working for decades to identify Force-sensitive individuals who are struggling with the psychological aftermath of the Jedi Purge, and she believes that unified Force techniques could be invaluable for helping these individuals heal from their trauma without falling to the dark side. The Secular Archive Network, coordinated by an artificial intelligence that has been studying galactic civilization patterns for millennia, offers access to comprehensive databases of political and social information that could help you identify optimal intervention points for healing work. Their analysis suggests that certain key individuals in various governments and organizations are positioned to influence galactic events in ways that could either accelerate or hinder the healing process, depending on how their personal development proceeds. As you prepare to leave the Nexus Temple and begin your work as Guardian, You feel the weight of these new alliances settling around your consciousness like a cloak of responsibility and possibility. The network of preservation sites represents resources that haven't been available for millions of years, but coordinating their efforts effectively will require diplomatic skills and strategic thinking that go far beyond anything taught in traditional Jedi or Sith training. The collective consciousness offers final guidance about the challenges that await you in the galaxy beyond the temple. The fragmenters will become increasingly active as they sense the threat that your mission represents to their long-term survival. They cannot manifest directly in normal space-time, but they can influence events and individuals in subtle ways. That will create obstacles and opposition to your healing work. More importantly, many of the people you'll need to work with will be psychologically invested in the current state of galactic civilization, even if that state causes them suffering. The artificial divisions in the Force have created corresponding divisions in galactic society, and healing one without addressing the other will be impossible. This means that your mission isn't just about demonstrating unified Force techniques, but about helping entire cultures and species overcome prejudices and conflicts that have shaped their identities for thousands of years. The path ahead is uncertain and fraught with dangers that you can perceive only dimly through the probability streams of the Garden of Possibilities. But it's also filled with unprecedented opportunities for positive change, chances to heal wounds that have festered for millions of years and create possibilities for galactic development that haven't existed since before recorded history began. As you and Dex walk through the crystal archway that leads back to the temple's landing platform, you carry with you not just the Harmony Stone and the Resonance Network crystals, but the hopes and wisdom of countless beings who chose to sacrifice their individual existence to preserve something precious for future generations. The ancient war that wounded the Force is finally approaching its end, and you have become the instrument through which that healing will begin. The shuttle's engines hum with renewed purpose as you and Dex lift off from the Nexus Temple's crystalline landing platform, carrying within your vessel not just the physical artifacts of your transformation, but the accumulated wisdom of millions of years of galactic history. Through the viewport, you watch the temple's spires fade into the perpetual twilight of the twin moons, but your connection to the collective consciousness remains as strong as ever through the resonance network crystals secured in your cargo. Hold! The hyperspace coordinates that Master Elena Vasquez provided lead to a rendezvous point in the Corellian system, where her agents have been monitoring the situation with the Sith artifact cult. The intelligence she's gathered paints a picture that's both more complex and more hopeful than your initial assessment suggested. The former Imperial officers aren't just random cultists seeking power for its own sake, but individuals who've been systematically failed by the new galactic order and are desperately searching for some sense of purpose and identity. Through the collective consciousness, you access detailed psychological profiles of the cult's leadership that reveal the deeper patterns driving their behavior. Commander Vex Cordano, the cult's primary organizer, served with distinction during the Battle of Endor, but found himself unemployed and ostracized after the Empire's collapse. His technical expertise and strategic thinking could be valuable assets for galactic reconstruction. But the New Republic's blanket policies against former Imperial personnel have left him feeling like a criminal for serving the only government he ever knew. Captain Lyra Thane, the cult's spiritual leader, discovered her Force sensitivity during the chaos following the Emperor's death. Without access to proper training or guidance, she's developed her abilities through trial and error, drawn to Sith techniques because they seem to offer more immediate power than the fragments of Jedi wisdom available through public sources. Her hunger for knowledge and her natural empathy suggest that she could become a powerful force for healing if provided with appropriate direction and support. The Sith artifacts themselves present a more complex challenge than simple removal or destruction would address. The relics are genuine, dating back to the ancient Sith Empire, and containing knowledge that could indeed be dangerous if misused. But they also represent fragments of galactic history that have educational value for those who can approach them with proper understanding and preparation. Destroying them would eliminate the immediate threat, but also waste an opportunity to learn from the mistakes of the past. The collective consciousness suggests a radically different approach to the situation, one that addresses the underlying causes of the cult's formation rather than simply treating its symptoms. Instead of confronting the cultists as enemies to be defeated, you could work to create conditions that allow them to experience the unified force directly, providing them with alternatives to the destructive path they've chosen while respecting their legitimate needs for purpose and community. The plan that emerges from your consultations with the preserved masters is both elegant and audacious. Using the Harmony Stone and several secondary resonance crystals, you'll establish a healing field around the cult's base of operations on a remote asteroid in the Outer Rim. This field will gradually neutralize the corrupting influence of the Sith artifacts while providing the cultists with opportunities to experience Force techniques that integrate light and dark aspects rather than emphasizing one over the other. But the success of this approach depends on careful timing and precise execution. The healing field must be established gradually over a period of several days to avoid triggering defensive responses from either the cultists or the fragmenters that have been feeding on the psychic energy generated by their activities. You'll need to infiltrate the asteroid facility and work from within to guide the transformation process, which means assuming false identities and maintaining your cover while channeling unified Force energies that could easily reveal your true nature to anyone with Force sensitivity. Dex's role in the mission proves crucial in ways that neither of you initially anticipated. His family heritage as a descendant of the Corran Navigator lineage provides him with specialized knowledge of asteroid belt navigation and mining operations, skills that will be essential for accessing the cult's hidden base. More importantly, his awakening Force sensitivity allows him to serve as an anchor point for the healing field, maintaining stability while you work to neutralize the Sith artifacts and redirect the cultists' energies toward constructive goals. Journey to the asteroid belt takes several days, during which you use the time to deepen your understanding of the unified Force techniques that the collective consciousness has preserved. The meditation practices are unlike anything taught in traditional Jedi or Sith training, emphasizing integration and harmony rather than control or domination. Instead of seeking to impose your will upon the Force, you learn to align yourself with its natural flows, becoming a conduit through which its healing energies can manifest in the physical world. The psychological preparation proves just as important as the technical training. Working with unified Force energies requires a fundamental shift in how you understand your relationship to the cosmos around you. The traditional Jedi emphasis on selflessness and service must be balanced with the Sith recognition of individual will and personal power, creating a synthesis that honors both perspectives while transcending the limitations of either approach alone. Through the Resonance Network, you maintain contact with the other preservation sites, coordinating your mission, with similar efforts taking place throughout the galaxy. The facility hidden beneath Coruscant reports successful contact with several Force-sensitive individuals who have been struggling with the psychological aftermath of the Jedi Purge, while the Secular Archive Network has identified political leaders who might be receptive to unified Force philosophy if approached with appropriate sensitivity and discretion. But the reports also contain warnings about increased fragmentar activity in response to these healing efforts. The parasitic entities that have fed on galactic conflict for millions of years are beginning to recognize the threat that the unified Force represents to their continued existence. Their influence manifests in subtle ways, encouraging political tensions, amplifying cultural prejudices, and creating situations that could easily escalate into the kind of large-scale conflicts that generate the psychic energy They need to survive. The asteroid facility where the Sith cult has established its base turns out to be a former Imperial mining operation that was abandoned. After the Battle of Endor, the cultists have done impressive work in restoring the facility's basic systems, but their modifications reflect a fundamental misunderstanding of how Sith technology actually functions. They've created a crude but functional temple complex within the asteroid's central chamber, surrounding the ancient artifacts with meditation platforms and training areas that amplify the relic's dark side emanations. Infiltrating the facility requires careful use of the Force techniques that the collective consciousness has taught you, allowing you to approach the asteroid without triggering the cult security systems or alerting their Force-sensitive members to your presence. The healing field you establish around the facility is so subtle that it's barely perceptible even to your enhanced awareness, but it immediately begins working to neutralize the corrupting influence of the Sith artifacts. The first sign that your intervention is having an effect comes from Commander Cardano himself. Within hours of the healing field's activation, he begins experiencing dreams that show him alternative paths for using his leadership abilities. Visions of reconstruction projects and exploration missions that could provide the sense of purpose he's been seeking without requiring him to embrace destructive philosophies. His technical expertise, which the cult has been using to maintain the facility's life support systems, could be invaluable for legitimate mining operations or infrastructure. Development projects. Captain Thane's response to the healing field is even more dramatic. Her natural Force sensitivity makes her particularly receptive to the unified energies you're channeling, and she begins experiencing spontaneous moments of integration that show her how light and dark aspects of the Force can work together rather than in opposition. Her hunger for knowledge and power doesn't diminish, but it begins to shift toward constructive applications that could benefit entire communities, rather than just serving her individual ambitions. The other cult members, most of whom have only limited Force sensitivity, respond to the healing field in ways that reflect their individual personalities and backgrounds. Some become more open to negotiation and compromise, while others experience creative inspirations that suggest new directions for their technical and artistic talents. The atmosphere of desperate fanaticism that initially characterized the cult begins to give way to something more resembling an enthusiastic study group exploring fascinating but potentially dangerous subjects. But the most significant change occurs in the Sith artifacts themselves. The ancient relics, which have been radiating dark side energy for millennia, begin to respond to the unified Force field in ways that reveal their true nature. The knowledge they contain isn't inherently evil or corrupting, but represents aspects of Force understanding that became twisted and dangerous when separated from their proper context within the unified whole. Working with the collective consciousness, you begin the delicate process of reintegrating the artifact's knowledge into a healthier framework. The techniques for channeling passion and anger that the relics teach can be valuable tools for personal growth and social change when balanced with wisdom and compassion. The methods for accessing hidden power that they describe can serve healing and construction just as effectively as destruction and domination. The transformation of the Sith artifacts provides concrete demonstration of the unified Force's healing potential that even the most skeptical cult members cannot ignore. Relics that once radiated menace and corruption begin to emit a warm, harmonious energy that makes meditation easier and more productive. Knowledge that seemed to require moral compromise to access becomes available through approaches that honor both individual will and collective well-being. Captain Thane proves to be your most valuable ally in guiding the cult's transformation. Her natural leadership abilities and genuine concern for her followers' welfare make her ideally suited to help them navigate the psychological challenges involved in abandoning destructive philosophies and embracing more constructive alternatives. Her experience with both light and dark aspects of the Force gives her credibility with cultists who might be suspicious of traditional Jedi approaches to Force training. But the success of your mission also attracts unwanted attention from the fragmenters whose influence you're working to neutralize. The parasitic entities cannot manifest directly in normal space-time, but they can work through individuals who are psychologically vulnerable to their influence. Several of the cult members who prove most resistant to the healing field's effects begin experiencing nightmares and waking visions that encourage them to see your intervention as a threat to their autonomy and identity. The crisis comes when these influenced individuals attempt to destroy the healing field generators, believing that they're protecting their community from some form of mental control or manipulation. The confrontation that results tests your commitment to unified Force principles in ways that theoretical training could never prepare you for. Traditional Jedi approaches would emphasize restraint and defensive measures, while Sith techniques would focus on overwhelming opposition through superior power. But the unified Force requires a synthesis that honors both perspectives while transcending their limitations. The solution you develop draws on techniques that the collective consciousness has preserved from the ancient Jedi tradition, methods that work by creating harmony rather than imposing control. Instead of fighting the influenced cultists or trying to force them to accept your help, you create conditions that allow them to experience the healing field's benefits directly while maintaining their sense of personal agency and choice. Process requires you to open yourself completely to the Force, becoming a conduit through which its healing energies can flow while maintaining enough individual will to guide the process toward constructive outcomes. The sensation is indescribable, like becoming a living bridge between the physical and spiritual dimensions of reality. Through your consciousness, the collective's accumulated wisdom flows into the present moment, while the immediate needs and concerns of the cultists flow back to inform the ancient master's understanding of contemporary challenges. The fragmenter's influence breaks down in the face of this direct demonstration of unified Force principles. The parasitic entities cannot survive in environments where artificial divisions between light and dark aspects of the Force have been healed, and their withdrawal from the situation creates space for genuine dialogue and cooperation to emerge. The cultists who had been resisting your intervention begin to understand that you're not trying to control or manipulate them, but to provide them with tools for achieving their legitimate goals through constructive means. The transformation of the asteroid facility from a dark side cult center into a legitimate research and training institution takes several weeks to complete, but the process provides valuable insights into how similar conversions might be accomplished elsewhere in the galaxy. The key factors that determine success appear to be the availability of alternative sources of purpose and identity, the presence of respected leaders who can guide the transition process, and the gradual introduction of unified Force techniques that demonstrate their practical value for achieving the community's goals. Commander Cordano proves to be particularly valuable in this regard, using his technical expertise to help redesign the facility's systems in ways that support constructive research rather than destructive ritual. His military background and organizational skills make him ideally suited to coordinate the complex logistics involved in transforming a hidden cult base into a legitimate academic institution. The New Republic's initial skepticism about his reformed intentions gradually gives way to recognition of his genuine commitment to constructive change. Captain Thane's development as a Force user provides a model for how others with similar backgrounds might be helped to integrate their abilities into healthy, productive lifestyles. Her natural empathy and leadership skills, combined with her hard-won understanding of both light and dark aspects of the Force, make her an ideal teacher for individuals who are struggling with the psychological challenges of Force sensitivity. Her ability to speak from personal experience about the attractions and dangers of Sith philosophy gives her credibility that traditional Jedi instructors might lack. The success of the asteroid mission establishes a template that can be adapted for similar situations throughout the galaxy, but it also reveals the enormous scope of the challenge that lies ahead. The artificial divisions in the Force have created corresponding divisions in galactic society that will require careful, patient work to heal. The process cannot be rushed or imposed from outside, but must emerge from within the affected communities themselves, supported by individuals who understand both the destination and the journey required to reach it. Through the Resonance Network, you share your experiences with the other preservation sites, providing them with practical knowledge about how unified Force techniques work in real-world situations. The feedback you receive suggests that similar transformations are beginning to occur throughout the galaxy, but also that the fragmenters are adapting their tactics in response to these healing efforts. The ancient war between unity and division is entering a new phase, one that will require unprecedented cooperation between all beings who value consciousness and creativity over conflict and destruction. The shadow of truth begins to manifest in ways that transcend the physical as word. Of your success with the asteroid cult spreads through the hidden networks that connect Force-sensitive communities across the galaxy. Through the resonance crystals, you feel the collective consciousness stirring with an anticipation that carries both hope and profound unease. The healing of the Sith artifacts and the transformation of the cultists represents more than just a tactical victory. It signals the beginning of a fundamental shift in the balance of power that has governed galactic civilization for millions of years. The Fragmenters' response to this challenge comes not as direct confrontation, but as a subtle poisoning of the very foundations of society. Through your enhanced perception, you begin to detect their influence in the growing political tensions that plague the New Republic, in the suspicious accidents that befall key figures who might otherwise support unified Force philosophy, and in the seemingly random conflicts that erupt between species and cultures that should be natural allies. Master Elena Vasquez contacts you through the network to report disturbing developments on Coruscant. Several of the Force-sensitive individuals her facility has been helping have experienced violent nightmares, filled with images of ancient wars and cosmic destruction. The dreams always end the same way, with a voice whispering that peace and unity are illusions that lead only to stagnation and death, that conflict and division are the natural order of the universe, and that attempting to heal the Force's wounds will ultimately destroy everything they hold dear. The Secular Archive Network provides additional evidence of the Fragmenters' increasing activity. Their artificial intelligence coordinators have detected statistical anomalies in galactic communication patterns, suggesting that information flows are being subtly manipulated to amplify divisive messages, while suppressing content that might promote understanding between different groups. The manipulation is so sophisticated that it appears to be natural market forces at work, but the cumulative effect is to create an atmosphere of mistrust and suspicion that makes cooperative efforts increasingly difficult to maintain. Even more troubling are the reports from the preservation site maintained by the descendants of the ancient Qua. Their facility has been monitoring dimensional stability throughout the galaxy for millennia, and their instruments are detecting fluctuations that suggest the Fragmenters are attempting to weaken the barriers between normal spacetime and the parallel dimensions they inhabit. If they succeed in creating permanent breaches, they could manifest directly in the physical universe for the first time since the ancient war that originally wounded the Force. The weight of these revelations settles upon you like a physical burden as you realize the true scope of what you've undertaken. The healing of individual communities and the transformation of small groups like the asteroid cult, significant though these achievements may be, represent only the beginning of a much larger struggle. The Fragmenters have had millions of years to establish their influence throughout galactic civilization, and rooting out that influence will require efforts that go far beyond anything you or the collective consciousness initially envisioned. Dex notices your growing tension as you study the intelligence reports flowing through the resonance network. You've been staring at those crystals for hours, kid, and you're starting to look like someone who's seen too much of the future for their own good. Maybe it's time to step back and focus on what we can actually control instead of trying to save the entire galaxy all at once. His words carry more wisdom than he realizes, echoing insights that the collective consciousness has been trying to share with you through more subtle means. The ancient masters who created the Nexus Temple learned through bitter experience that the burden of cosmic responsibility can be as corrupting as any Sith technique if not balanced with proper perspective and emotional grounding. The healing of the Force's wounds cannot be accomplished through individual heroism or isolated communities working in secret. It requires a fundamental transformation of galactic consciousness that can only emerge through the accumulated choices of countless individuals acting in harmony with unified Force principles. This understanding leads to a crucial shift in your approach to the Guardian role. Instead of trying to orchestrate events from behind the scenes or manipulate circumstances to produce desired outcomes, you begin to focus on creating conditions that allow the healing process to unfold naturally. Your role becomes less about directing change and more about removing obstacles that prevent people from recognizing their inherent connection to the unified Force. The first application of this new approach comes when you receive a request for assistance from an unexpected source. Senator Leah Organa, now serving as a senior leader in the New Republic government, has been experiencing what she describes as prophetic dreams that show her glimpses of galactic futures that range from transcendent unity to apocalyptic destruction. Her natural Force sensitivity, combined with her position at the center of galactic politics, makes her ideally suited to serve as a bridge between the mystical aspects of your mission and the practical challenges of governance. But Leah's situation also presents unique dangers. Her prominence makes her a natural target for fragmentar influence, and her deep emotional connections to the victims of imperial oppression create psychological vulnerabilities that parasitic entities could exploit. The collective consciousness warns that approaching her directly could expose both your mission and her own psychological stability to risks that might outweigh any potential benefits. The solution you develop draws on the subtlest techniques preserved within the temple's archives, methods that work by creating resonance fields that strengthen natural psychological defenses rather than imposing external protection. Working with the Harmony Stone and several secondary crystals, you establish a network of healing nodes throughout the Coruscant system that gradually neutralize fragmentar influence, while enhancing the Force sensitivity of individuals who are already naturally attuned to cosmic harmonies. The process takes weeks to complete and requires the cooperation of Master Vasquez's agents throughout the capital system. Each healing node must be placed with mathematical precision to create constructive interference patterns that amplify unified Force energies while canceling out the disruptive vibrations that the fragmentars use to maintain their influence. The work is exhausting and dangerous, requiring you to channel enormous amounts of cosmic energy while maintaining the delicate mental balance necessary to avoid being overwhelmed by the unified Force's overwhelming harmonies. But the results exceed even the collective consciousness's most optimistic projections. Senator Organa's prophetic dreams gradually shift from nightmarish visions of conflict and destruction to inspiring glimpses of what galactic civilization could become if its underlying divisions were healed. Her political speeches begin to incorporate themes of unity and cooperation that resonate with audiences across species and cultural lines, creating ripple effects that extend far beyond the formal boundaries of New Republic territory. More importantly, other Force-sensitive individuals throughout the Coruscant system begin experiencing their own moments of unified Force contact. Former Imperial officers discover that their military training can serve constructive purposes if balanced with wisdom and compassion. Jedi survivors find that their traditional techniques become more powerful and effective when integrated with insights from other Force traditions. Even individuals with no formal Force training begin to develop intuitive abilities that help them navigate complex social and political situations with unprecedented skill and wisdom. The transformation of Coruscant from a center of political division into a beacon of unified Force philosophy attracts attention from throughout the galaxy. Delegations from dozens of worlds arrive to study the changes taking place in the capital system, hoping to understand how similar transformations might be achieved in their own communities. The New Republic government, initially skeptical of developments that seem to blur the traditional boundaries between politics and mysticism, gradually begins to recognize the practical value of approaches that address the underlying causes of conflict rather than simply managing its symptoms. But the success of the Coruscant project also triggers a dramatic escalation in fragmenter activity throughout the galaxy. The parasitic entities, recognizing that their long-term survival is threatened by the spread of unified Force philosophy, begin to manifest through individuals and communities that are psychologically vulnerable to their influence. Sith cults that had been dormant for decades suddenly become active, while political movements that had been moderate and reasonable begin to embrace increasingly extreme positions. The most dangerous development occurs in the unknown regions, where several Imperial remnant factions have been experimenting with ancient Sith technologies in an attempt to recreate the Empire's former power. The Fragmenter's influence transforms these relatively conventional military operations into something far more sinister, as the remnant leaders begin to see themselves as instruments of cosmic destiny rather than mere political actors seeking to restore their former privileges. Through the probability streams accessible via the Garden of Possibilities, you perceive the catastrophic potential of these developments. The Imperial remnants are not just building conventional military forces, but are attempting to create weapons that could wound the Force itself, using techniques derived from the same ancient technologies that originally created the divisions between light and dark aspects of cosmic energy. If they succeed, the damage could be irreversible, creating wounds in reality that would take millions of years to heal. The collective consciousness convenes an emergency session to address this unprecedented threat, drawing on the wisdom of preserved masters from across galactic history to develop appropriate responses. The discussion that follows reveals fundamental disagreements about how to balance the principles of unified Force philosophy with the practical necessities of preventing cosmic catastrophe. Some of the ancient masters argue for direct intervention, using the full power of the preservation network to neutralize the Imperial remnants before they can complete their apocalyptic projects. Others contend that such action would violate the core principles of unified Force philosophy, which emphasizes natural harmony over imposed solutions. A third faction suggests that the crisis represents an opportunity to demonstrate the power of unified Force techniques on a galactic scale, potentially catalyzing the transformation of consciousness that the healing process ultimately requires. Debate continues for days, with each faction presenting compelling arguments based on their accumulated experience and wisdom. But ultimately, the decision rests with you as the active guardian, the bridge between the collective's transcendent perspective and the immediate challenges of the physical universe. The choice you make will determine not just the fate of the current crisis, but the long-term direction of the healing process that you've been entrusted to guide. Through your enhanced awareness, you begin to perceive connections between the Imperial remnant crisis and broader patterns of galactic development that the collective consciousness has been studying for millennia. The Fragmenter's influence operates through cycles of expansion and consolidation, creating periods of apparent stability that are actually preparation for catastrophic upheavals. The original ancient war that wounded the Force followed this pattern, as did the rise and fall of numerous galactic empires throughout recorded history. But the current crisis also represents something unprecedented in the galaxy's history. For the first time since the original wound was inflicted, there exists a network of preservation sites and unified force, practitioners that could potentially break the cycle of conflict and catastrophe that has dominated galactic civilization for millions of years. The Imperial Remnant's attempt to create force-wounding weapons may be the Fragmenter's final desperate gambit to maintain their influence, but it could also provide the catalyst necessary to awaken galactic consciousness to the true nature of the cosmic forces that have been shaping their destiny. The insight that emerges from this analysis suggests a radical approach to the crisis, one that transcends the traditional alternatives of intervention or non-intervention. Instead of trying to stop the Imperial remnants directly or allowing them to proceed unchallenged, you could work to transform the consciousness of the individuals involved, providing them with direct experience of unified force principles that would make their destructive projects impossible to complete. This approach would require unprecedented cooperation between all the preservation sites and their associated networks, creating a galaxy-spanning healing field that could neutralize fragmentar influence while demonstrating the practical benefits of unified force philosophy. The risks are enormous, as failure could result in the complete exposure of the preservation network and the destruction of knowledge that has been carefully guarded for millions of years. But success could inaugurate a new age of galactic consciousness that would make the ancient divisions and conflicts irrelevant. The collective consciousness responds to your proposal with a mixture of excitement and terror that reflects the magnitude of what you're suggesting. Some of the preserved masters are eager to finally complete the work they began when they chose to merge with the temple's systems, while others worry that such an ambitious undertaking could result in the kind of catastrophic failure that originally wounded the Force. But all of them recognize that the current crisis represents a unique opportunity that may not arise again for millions of years. As you prepare to coordinate with the other preservation sites and begin the most ambitious healing project in galactic history, you feel the weight of destiny settling around your consciousness like a mantle woven from starlight and shadow. The ancient war between unity and division is approaching its climax, and the choices you make in the coming days will determine whether the galaxy enters a new age of harmony and cooperation or descends into conflicts that could destroy the very foundations of reality itself. The Fragmenters have revealed their ultimate strategy, and now you must respond with wisdom that transcends anything the galaxy has seen since the Force was first wounded by the arrogance and fear of beings who thought they could impose their will upon the cosmic order. The healing of the galaxy's deepest wounds is about to begin, but first, the full scope of those wounds must be revealed for all to see. In the depths of space, ancient powers stir from their long slumber, and the fate of countless worlds hangs in the balance between forces that most beings cannot even perceive, let alone understand. The moment of ultimate revelation arrives not as a single catastrophic event, but as a cascade of interconnected awakenings that sweep across the galaxy, like ripples spreading from a stone dropped into still water. Through the resonance network, you feel the collective consciousness of every preservation site, reaching a moment of perfect synchronization, their combined awareness creating a web of unified force energy that spans thousands of star systems and touches the lives of billions of sentient beings. The Imperial Remnant crisis that seemed so threatening just days ago suddenly reveals itself as merely the surface manifestation of something far more profound and transformative. The force-wounding weapons that the Remnant factions have been developing aren't just military technology, but inadvertent catalysts that are triggering the final phase of the healing process that began millions of years ago. When the first preservation sites were established, the ancient masters preserved within the vast Nexus Temple share their deepest revelations as the moment of climax approaches. The artificial division between light and dark aspects of the Force wasn't just the result of an Ancient war between competing philosophies. It was the inevitable consequence of consciousness itself reaching a critical threshold of development, a cosmic metamorphosis that required the temporary fragmentation of unity in order to explore the full spectrum of possibilities contained. Within the cosmic order, every conflict between Jedi and Sith, every rise and fall of galactic empires, every moment of suffering and triumph in galactic history has been part of this vast evolutionary process. The fragmenters themselves aren't truly parasitic entities, but aspects of cosmic consciousness that became separated from the whole, serving the essential function of maintaining creative tension while the universe explored the implications of division and conflict. But the exploration phase is now complete, and the time has come for consciousness to reunite with itself at a higher level of integration. The force-wounding weapons that the Imperial remnants are developing will serve as the final catalyst for this transformation, not by destroying the Force, but by forcing it to heal itself in ways that will permanently transcend the artificial divisions that have defined galactic civilization for so long. Through your enhanced awareness, you perceive the cosmic mechanics of what's about to unfold. The weapons themselves are crude attempts to replicate the original wound that divided the Force, but they're being built by beings whose consciousness has evolved far beyond what existed during the ancient war. When activated, they won't succeed in creating new divisions, but will instead trigger a healing response that draws upon the accumulated wisdom and experience of every sentient being in the galaxy. The revelation explains why the collective consciousness chose you specifically to serve as guardian at this crucial moment in galactic history. Your hybrid nature, existing simultaneously as an individual and as part of the preserved network, makes you ideally suited to serve as a focal point for the transformation. Through your consciousness, the accumulated wisdom of the ancient masters can flow into the present moment, while the immediate experiences of contemporary beings can inform and guide the healing process. But the transformation cannot be accomplished through your efforts alone. It requires the conscious participation of beings throughout the galaxy who are willing to transcend their traditional understanding of identity and purpose in service of something greater than individual survival or success. The network of preservation. CITES represents the infrastructure necessary to support this transformation, but the actual work must be done by ordinary individuals, making extraordinary choices in their daily lives. The first signs of the approaching climax manifest as spontaneous awakenings among Force-sensitive individuals throughout the galaxy. Jedi survivors who have been hiding their abilities for decades suddenly find themselves compelled to emerge from concealment and begin teaching others. Former Imperial officers discover that their military training has prepared them for roles as peacekeepers and conflict mediators in ways they never imagined. Even individuals with no formal Force training begin experiencing moments of cosmic awareness that transform their understanding of their place in the universe. Senator Leia Organa becomes one of the most prominent examples of this spontaneous awakening process. Her prophetic dreams evolve into waking visions that show her the specific legislative and diplomatic initiatives necessary to prepare galactic civilization for the coming transformation. Working with insights that seem to flow directly from the cosmic order itself, she begins crafting policies that address the root causes of interspecies conflict while creating frameworks for the kind of cooperation that unified Force philosophy makes possible. But the most dramatic manifestation of the approaching climax occurs among the Imperial remnant factions themselves. As they work to complete their Force-wounding weapons, the individuals involved begin experiencing the same kind of unified Force contact that you first encountered in the Nexus Temple. The knowledge and power they thought they were seeking through artificial means becomes available to them naturally, but only if they're willing to abandon their destructive goals and embrace the healing process that the galaxy desperately needs. Commander Thrax Keller, the primary architect of the weapon project, experiences a particularly profound transformation. His brilliant tactical mind, which had been focused on recreating the Empire's former dominance, suddenly perceives the strategic implications of galactic healing with crystalline clarity. The same analytical abilities that made him dangerous as an Imperial officer make him invaluable as a coordinator of the reconstruction efforts that will be necessary after the transformation is complete. Captain Myra Voss, the project's lead technician, discovers that her expertise in ancient technologies has prepared her to serve as a bridge between the old galactic order and the new consciousness that is emerging. Her understanding of how Sith artifacts function gives her unique insights into the process of healing the artificial divisions that have plagued the Force for millions of years. The collective consciousness shares the deeper implications of these individual transformations through the resonance network. What appears to be the spontaneous awakening of scattered individuals is actually the manifestation of a galactic intelligence that has been developing over millions of years of accumulated experience and wisdom. Every choice made by every sentient being throughout galactic history has contributed to this emerging consciousness, creating a vast network of interconnected awareness that transcends the boundaries between individual minds. The preservation sites scattered throughout the galaxy aren't just repositories of ancient knowledge, but nodes in this galactic intelligence, points of focus where the accumulated wisdom of the ages can manifest in practical forms that serve the needs of contemporary civilization. Your role as Guardian isn't just about preserving the past or guiding the present, but about serving as a conscious participant in the emergence of a form of collective awareness that has never existed before. But this emerging galactic consciousness faces its greatest test as the Imperial remnant weapons approach operational status. Through the probability streams accessible via the Garden of Possibilities, you perceive multiple potential outcomes for the approaching crisis. In some timelines, the weapons succeed in creating new wounds in the Force that require millions of years to heal. In others, the healing process is completed, but at the cost of individual identity and autonomy, creating a universe where personal choice and creativity are absorbed into collective harmony. The optimal outcome requires a precise balance between individual consciousness and collective awareness, preserving the unique perspectives and capabilities of separate beings, while allowing them to participate consciously in the larger patterns of cosmic development. Achieving this balance depends on the choices made by beings throughout the galaxy in the critical moments when the weapons are activated, and the healing process reaches its climax. Working with the collective consciousness and the network of preservation sites, you begin to coordinate the most complex undertaking in galactic history. Healing fields must be established around every major population center, creating zones of unified Force energy that can protect civilian populations while allowing them to participate consciously in the transformation process. Communication networks must be prepared to carry information and guidance to every corner of the galaxy, ensuring that beings everywhere understand what's happening and how they can contribute constructively to the healing process. Most importantly, individuals who have been trained in unified Force techniques must be positioned at key locations throughout the galaxy, serving as focal points for the healing energy and guides for those who are experiencing cosmic consciousness for the first time. The former members of the asteroid cult, now transformed into dedicated practitioners of integrated Force philosophy, prove invaluable in this regard, as their personal experience with the healing process gives them credibility with individuals who might be suspicious of more traditional authority figures. The final preparations take place as reports arrive that the Imperial remnant weapons are entering their final testing phases. The collective consciousness provides moment-by-moment guidance as you and Dex make your way to the primary weapon site, located in a hidden facility deep within the unknown regions. The journey requires navigation through space that has been distorted by experimental applications. of force-wounding technology, creating hazards that would be impossible to overcome without the enhanced abilities that your guardian role provides. The weapon facility itself proves to be a masterwork of ancient and modern technology, combining Sith architectural principles with contemporary engineering techniques to create a structure that exists partially outside normal space-time. The energy readings that Dex's instruments detect suggest that the weapon is designed not just to wound the Force locally, but to create resonance effects that would propagate throughout the galaxy, potentially affecting every Force-sensitive being in known space. But as you approach the facility, you realize that the weapon's true purpose isn't what its creators intended. The collective consciousness reveals that the device has been subtly influenced by the preservation network from the moment of its conception, guided by forces that the Imperial remnants couldn't perceive or understand. Instead of creating new wounds in the Force, the weapon will serve as a massive healing array, channeling the accumulated trauma of millions of years of galactic conflict into a transformation that will permanently transcend the artificial divisions that have defined civilized existence. Imperial remnant personnel at the facility are experiencing their own moments of awakening as the weapon approaches activation. The same unified force energies that you've been channeling throughout your mission begin to manifest spontaneously around the device, creating an atmosphere of profound transformation that affects everyone present regardless of their previous training or philosophical orientation. Commander Keller approaches you as you enter the facility's central chamber, his expression showing none of the fanatical determination that characterized his earlier communications. "The weapon isn't what we thought we were building," he says, his voice filled with wonder and uncertainty. "Every time we run the activation sequences, the readings show something completely different from what the theoretical models predicted. It's as if the device is rewriting itself, becoming something that serves purposes we never intended." Captain Voss confirms these observations from a technical perspective, explaining that the weapon systems have been evolving during the construction process in ways that violate every known principle of engineering and physics. The modifications appear to be guided by some form of intelligence that understands the device's true purpose better than its creators do. Instead of generating destructive energies, the completed weapon will function as an amplifier for the healing processes that the preservation network has been developing for millions of years. The moment of ultimate revelation arrives as the weapon reaches full operational status and begins its activation sequence. Instead of the catastrophic discharge that everyone expected, the device begins to generate harmonious energies that resonate with healing fields throughout the galaxy. Through the resonance network, you feel the collective consciousness of every preservation site joining in perfect synchronization, their combined awareness creating a web of unified force energy that encompasses the entire known galaxy. The artificial divisions between light and dark aspects of the Force begin to dissolve as the healing energies reach critical intensity. Jedi and Sith techniques merge into integrated approaches that honor both individual will and collective harmony. Political conflicts that seemed irreconcilable suddenly reveal solutions that serve the legitimate needs of all parties involved. Species that have been enemies for millennia discover common ground that had been hidden by artificial divisions and manufactured grievances. But the most profound change occurs at the level of individual consciousness. Beings throughout the galaxy begin to experience direct awareness of their connection to the cosmic order, understanding for the first time that their personal choices and actions contribute to patterns of development that extend far beyond their immediate circumstances. The sense of isolation and meaninglessness that has plagued galactic civilization for so long gives way to a profound recognition of purpose and belonging that transforms every aspect of social and cultural life. The fragmenters, revealed now as aspects of cosmic consciousness that had become separated from the whole, begin to reintegrate with the unified force as the healing process reaches completion. Their hunger for conflict and division dissolves, as they remember their original nature as creative forces that serve the evolution of consciousness rather than its destruction. The parasitic behavior that characterized their influence for millions of years transforms into constructive participation in the ongoing development of galactic awareness. As you stand in the weapon facility's central chamber, watching energies that transcend all previous understanding flow through crystalline arrays that have been transformed into instruments of cosmic healing. You feel the weight of your guardian role shifting into something entirely new. The preservation of ancient knowledge remains important, but it's no longer the primary focus of your mission. Instead, you've become a conscious participant in the emergence of a form of galactic intelligence that has the potential to guide civilization toward forms of development that have never been achieved before. The whisper that was lost in time has indeed grown into a storm across eternity, but it's a storm of awakening rather than destruction, a cosmic wind that carries the seeds of transformation to every corner of the galaxy and beyond. The ancient war between unity and division is finally ending, not through the victory of one side over the other, but through the recognition that both sides were aspects of a larger pattern of development that required their conflict in order to explore the full implications of consciousness and choice. The healing has begun, and nothing in the galaxy will ever be the same. The resolution unfolds not as a single moment of triumph, but as a gradual dawning of understanding that spreads through galactic consciousness like the first light of dawn touching the edges of a vast horizon. As the healing energies generated by the transformed weapon facility continue to cascade through the resonance network, you feel the collective consciousness of the preservation sites achieving a state of harmony that transcends anything recorded. In their millions of years of accumulated memory, the artificial divisions that have shaped galactic civilization since the dawn of recorded history begin to dissolve in ways that are both subtle and profound. On Coruscant, Senator Leah Organa finds herself addressing the New Republic Senate with words that seem to flow directly from the cosmic order itself, articulating principles of governance that honor both individual autonomy and collective well-being in ways that no political philosophy has ever achieved before. Her speech resonates with representatives from dozens of species and cultures, creating the foundation for a new form of galactic cooperation that transcends the traditional boundaries of nationalism and speciesism. Throughout the core worlds, former Imperial officers and New Republic officials discover that their accumulated experience and expertise can serve purposes they never imagined when guided by unified force principles. Military strategists become conflict mediators using their understanding of warfare to prevent battles rather than win them. Intelligence operatives transform into diplomatic liaisons, applying their skills in analysis and communication to build bridges between communities that have been separated by centuries of mistrust and misunderstanding. But the most profound changes occur at the level of individual consciousness among ordinary beings who have never considered themselves to be force-sensitive. Factory workers on industrial worlds begin to experience their labor as a form of meditation, finding meaning and purpose in activities that had previously seemed monotonous and alienating. Farmers on agricultural planets discover that their connection to the land provides access to forms of wisdom that transcend anything taught in formal educational institutions. Artists and entertainers throughout the galaxy find themselves creating works that express universal truths in ways that speak to the deepest aspirations of sentient consciousness. The collective consciousness shares insights about the deeper implications of these transformations through the resonance network. What appears to be the spontaneous awakening of individual beings is actually the manifestation of a galactic intelligence that has been developing through the accumulated choices and experiences of countless generations. Every act of compassion, every moment of courage, every choice to create rather than destroy, has contributed to the emergence of this cosmic awareness that now encompasses the entire known galaxy. The preservation sites that seemed so mysterious and isolated when you first encountered them reveal their true nature as nodes in this galactic intelligence, points of focus where the accumulated wisdom of the ages can manifest in practical forms that serve the needs of contemporary civilization. The ancient masters who chose to merge their consciousness with the temple systems weren't just preserving knowledge, but were actively participating in the development of a form of collective awareness that could guide galactic civilization toward its highest potential. Your role as guardian undergoes a fundamental transformation as these deeper truths become clear. Instead of serving as a bridge between the living and the preserved, you become a conscious participant in the ongoing evolution of galactic consciousness itself. The knowledge and wisdom of the collective consciousness flows through your awareness, not as external information, but as integral aspects of your own expanded identity. While your individual perspective and experience contribute to the development of cosmic understanding in ways that transcend anything the ancient masters could have achieved through their own efforts, the former Imperial Remnant personnel at the weapon facility experience their own profound transformations as the healing process reaches its climax. Commander Keller's brilliant tactical mind, liberated from the constraints of destructive thinking, begins to perceive strategic opportunities for galactic reconstruction that could create unprecedented prosperity and stability throughout known space. His military expertise, combined with the cosmic perspective that unified force awareness provides, makes him ideally suited to coordinate the massive logistical challenges involved in transforming galactic civilization. Captain Voss discovers that her understanding of ancient technologies has prepared her to serve as a translator between the wisdom of the preservation sites and the practical needs of contemporary society. The same analytical abilities that made her dangerous as a weapon developer make her invaluable as a designer of technologies that enhance rather than exploit the natural processes of cosmic development. Her work begins to bridge the gap between mystical understanding and scientific application in ways that promise to revolutionize every aspect of galactic civilization. But perhaps the most significant transformation occurs among the rank-and-file personnel who had been following orders without fully understanding the implications of their actions. As the unified force energies generated by the healing process touch their consciousness, they begin to experience direct awareness of their connection to the cosmic order. The sense of purposelessness and alienation that had driven them to embrace destructive ideologies gives way to a profound recognition of their role in the ongoing evolution of galactic consciousness. The dissolution of the fragmenters as separate entities marks a crucial milestone in the healing process. As their parasitic consciousness reintegrates with the unified force, the artificial conflicts and divisions that they had been maintaining throughout the galaxy begin to resolve naturally. Political disputes that had seemed irreconcilable suddenly reveal solutions that serve the legitimate interests of all parties involved. Economic systems that had been based on exploitation and scarcity transform into cooperative networks that generate abundance. Through conscious coordination of individual talents and resources, the reintegration process also reveals the true nature of the ancient wound that divided the Force millions of years ago. The original conflict between the nurturers and the shapers wasn't just a philosophical disagreement that got out of hand, but was actually a necessary phase in the evolution of cosmic consciousness. The division allowed the universe to explore the full spectrum of possibilities contained within the fundamental forces of creation and destruction, order and chaos, individual will and collective harmony. But that exploration phase is now complete, and the time has come for consciousness to reunite with itself at a higher level of integration. The artificial divisions between light and dark aspects of the Force dissolve as beings throughout the galaxy begin to understand that these categories were temporary constructs designed to facilitate learning, rather than permanent features of cosmic reality. The unified force that emerges from this healing process contains within itself all the wisdom and power that had been separated during the Age of Division, but organized according to principles that transcend the limitations of either extreme. The collective consciousness provides detailed explanations of how this transformation will affect the practical aspects of galactic civilization. The political systems that have been based on competing interests and zero-sum thinking will evolve into cooperative networks that maximize benefit for all participants. Economic structures that have relied on artificial scarcity and exploitative relationships will be replaced by abundance-generating systems that harness the creative potential of conscious cooperation. Educational institutions that have focused on training individuals for specific roles will develop into wisdom-sharing communities that help each being discover and develop their unique contributions to the cosmic order. But the transformation isn't imposed from above or mandated by any external authority. Instead, it emerges naturally from the choices of individual beings who have awakened to their connection with the galactic intelligence. Each person retains their individual identity and autonomy while simultaneously participating in the larger patterns of cosmic development. The balance between personal freedom and collective harmony that had seemed impossible to achieve under the old paradigms becomes natural and effortless when guided by unified force principles. The communication networks that connect the preservation sites throughout the galaxy evolve into something unprecedented in galactic history. Instead of simply transmitting information from one location to another, they become conduits for the flow of consciousness itself, allowing beings anywhere in the galaxy to access the accumulated wisdom of the ages while contributing their own insights and experiences to the collective understanding. The barriers between individual minds don't disappear, but they become permeable in ways that allow for unprecedented forms of cooperation and mutual support. The healing process also transforms the relationship between different species and cultures throughout the galaxy. The artificial conflicts and prejudices that had been maintained by fragmenter influence dissolve as beings begin to perceive the unique contributions that each form of consciousness brings to the galactic intelligence. Humans discover that their adaptability and innovation complement the analytical abilities of Syrians and the intuitive wisdom of Twi'leks. Wookiees find that their connection to natural processes enhances the technological sophistication of species like the Corellians and the Alderaanians. But the most profound changes occur in the realm of force training and application. The rigid distinctions between Jedi and Sith techniques give way to integrated approaches that honor both individual will and collective well-being. The emotional suppression that characterized traditional Jedi training is balanced with healthy expression of passion and desire. The power-seeking that drove Sith philosophy is channeled into constructive applications that serve the development of galactic consciousness rather than individual domination. New forms of force training emerge that prepare individuals to serve as conscious participants in the galactic intelligence while maintaining their unique perspectives and capabilities. These programs draw on the accumulated wisdom of all force traditions, combining the discipline and service orientation of the Jedi with the passion and individual empowerment of the Sith. The intuitive connection to natural processes developed by traditions like the Night Sisters, and the balanced approach to cosmic forces that characterize the ancient Jedi, the asteroid facility that was the site of your first major success as Guardian, transforms into a model for the new forms of community that are emerging throughout the galaxy. Former cult members work alongside New Republic officials and reformed Imperial officers to create a research and training center that exemplifies the principles of unified force philosophy. Their success in integrating beings from radically different backgrounds demonstrates the practical viability of approaches that seemed utopian under the old paradigms. Captain Thane, whose transformation from Sith cultist to unified force practitioner exemplifies the healing process at its most personal level, becomes a leader in developing new approaches to force training that honor the full spectrum of consciousness. Her ability to speak from direct experience about both the attractions and the dangers of extremist philosophies gives her unique credibility with individuals who are struggling to find their place in the transformed galactic order. The Nexus Temple itself undergoes a fundamental transformation as the healing process reaches completion. Instead of existing partially outside normal space-time, it becomes fully integrated with the physical universe, while retaining its special properties as a focus for cosmic consciousness. The crystalline spires that had seemed so alien and mysterious reveal themselves as organic expressions of unified force principles, their structures reflecting the natural patterns of cosmic development that transcend the artificial categories of technology and mysticism. The collective consciousness that had been preserved within the temple's crystal matrix expands beyond the boundaries of its original form, becoming integrated with the galactic intelligence that now encompasses the entire known galaxy. The ancient masters who had sacrificed their individual existence to preserve wisdom for future generations discover that their sacrifice has been transformed into participation in something far greater than they had ever imagined possible. Through the resonance network, you feel the pulse of this transformed galactic consciousness as it continues to evolve and develop. Every choice made by every sentient being contributes to its growth, while the accumulated wisdom of the ages provides guidance and support for individuals navigating the challenges of conscious existence. The relationship between individual and collective consciousness achieves a dynamic balance that allows for both personal growth and cosmic development. But the completion of the healing process also marks the beginning of new challenges and opportunities that transcend anything that galactic civilization has previously encountered. The unified force that now permeates the galaxy contains within itself the potential for forms of development that extend beyond the boundaries of known space and time. The techniques for consciousness preservation and expansion that were developed by the preservation sites hint at possibilities for existence that transcend the traditional limitations of physical embodiment. As you stand in the transformed weapon facility, watching energies that represent the convergence of millions of years of cosmic evolution flow through crystalline arrays that have become instruments of galactic awakening, you understand that your role as guardian has evolved into something entirely unprecedented. You are no longer just a bridge between the past and the present, but a conscious participant in the ongoing creation of galactic consciousness itself. The knowledge is both gift and curse, as the collective consciousness had warned, but the curse has been transformed into blessing through the recognition that consciousness itself is the fundamental creative force of the universe. The burden of individual responsibility gives way to the joy of conscious participation in cosmic development, while the isolation of separate existence dissolves into the recognition of fundamental interconnection with all life. The galaxy has been forever changed by the healing of its deepest wounds, but the change represents not an ending but a beginning, the first chapter in a story of conscious evolution that extends far beyond the boundaries of current understanding. The ancient war between unity and division has ended, but the creative tension between individual consciousness and collective awareness continues to drive development toward forms of existence that have never been achieved before. The whisper, lost in time, has indeed become a storm across eternity, but it is a storm of awakening that carries the seeds of transformation to every corner of the cosmos and beyond. The aftermath of the great healing unfolds across the galaxy like the slow breathing of some vast awakening consciousness. In the weeks following the transformation of the Imperial Weapon Facility, you find yourself traveling between worlds that seem familiar yet fundamentally changed, as if viewing beloved landscapes through new eyes that perceive dimensions of beauty and meaning that had always been present but never before accessible to conscious awareness. Your first stop is Coruscant, where the changes wrought by the unified force are most visible in the planet's political and social structures. The Senate chambers that once echoed with the harsh rhetoric of factional conflict now host discussions that flow with the rhythm of genuine dialogue, where representatives from different worlds and species seek solutions that honor the legitimate needs of all parties rather than advancing narrow sectoral interests. Senator Leah Organa greets you with a smile that carries depths of understanding that transcend her previous political acumen. The prophetic dreams that once troubled her sleep have evolved into a constant flow of insight that guides her decisions with the wisdom of cosmic perspective, while keeping her grounded in the immediate needs of sentient beings. Her recent legislation, establishing the Galactic Harmony Initiative, represents a completely new approach to interspecies cooperation, one that addresses the root causes of conflict rather than simply managing its symptoms. But the changes on Coruscant extend far beyond the realm of politics. In the lower levels of the Ecumenopolis, where poverty and desperation once bred crime and violence, community organizations are emerging that channel the unified Force principles into practical programs for social reconstruction. Former gang members work alongside New Republic officials to create opportunities for meaningful work and personal development. Corporate executives who once pursued profit regardless of social cost discover that their business skills can serve abundance-generating enterprises that benefit entire communities. The transformation is particularly visible among the planet's Force-sensitive population. The hidden survivors of the Jedi Purge emerge from decades of concealment to establish new training centers that integrate wisdom from all Force traditions. Their teaching methods bear little resemblance to the rigid hierarchies of the old Jedi Order, emphasizing instead cooperative learning environments where students and teachers alike contribute to the development of cosmic understanding. Master Elena Vasquez's preservation site beneath the former Jedi Temple has become the nucleus for these new educational initiatives. The facility that once operated in absolute secrecy now welcomes beings from throughout the galaxy who seek to understand their connection to the unified Force. The crystalline archives that preserved ancient knowledge for millennia have been supplemented with contemporary records that document the ongoing evolution of galactic consciousness. Through the Resonance Network, you maintain constant communication with similar developments throughout the galaxy. On Naboo, the peaceful traditions of the planet's human and Gungan populations merge with unified Force principles to create new forms of environmental harmony that exceed anything achieved during the world's golden age. The plasma energy that once powered weapons and technology is redirected toward enhancing the natural processes that maintain planetary ecosystems. The transformation of Naboo provides a model for similar developments on countless other worlds. Agricultural planets discover that their farmers can channel unified Force energy to enhance crop yields while maintaining soil health and biodiversity. Industrial worlds find that their manufacturing processes can be redesigned to work in harmony with natural cycles rather than exploiting and depleting planetary resources. Even the most urbanized core worlds begin to integrate natural elements into their cityscape designs, creating environments that support both technological sophistication and ecological balance. But perhaps the most profound changes occur in the realm of individual consciousness and personal relationships. The artificial divisions that had separated beings according to species, culture, and social class begin to dissolve as individuals recognize their fundamental interconnection through the galactic intelligence. Marriages between members of different species become increasingly common, not as exotic exceptions, but as natural expressions of the unity that underlies apparent diversity. Children born after the Great Healing display abilities and awareness that transcend anything recorded in galactic history. They seem naturally attuned to unified Force principles, demonstrating from their earliest years an intuitive understanding of the balance between individual will and collective harmony. Their play activities often resemble meditation practices, while their games involve forms of cooperation that create emergent intelligence exceeding what any individual participant could achieve alone. The educational systems that emerge to serve these remarkable children bear little resemblance to traditional academic institutions. Instead of segregating knowledge into separate subjects and disciplines, the new schools integrate all forms of learning into holistic experiences that develop every aspect of consciousness simultaneously. Students learn mathematics through music, explore science through art, understand history through direct communion with the preserved consciousness of those who lived through past events. Your visit to the asteroid facility, where your guardian role first found its practical expression, reveals the full scope of the transformation that has swept through galactic civilization. The former cult members who once sought power through Sith techniques now work as counselors and guides for individuals throughout the Outer Rim who are struggling to integrate their awakening Force sensitivity into productive lifestyles. Their hard-won understanding of both the attractions and the dangers of extremist philosophies makes them invaluable resources for communities dealing with the challenges of consciousness expansion. Captain Thane has become the facility's primary coordinator, her natural leadership abilities enhanced by the cosmic perspective that unified Force awareness provides. Under her guidance, the asteroid has evolved into something unprecedented in galactic history, a fully functional community that operates according to principles that honor both individual autonomy and collective well-being. Every decision is made through consensus processes that allow all voices to be heard while maintaining efficiency and effectiveness. The community's economic system exemplifies the new approaches to resource distribution that are emerging throughout the galaxy. Instead of competing for artificially scarce resources, community members contribute their unique talents and abilities to collaborative projects that generate abundance for everyone involved. The mining operations that once extracted valuable minerals for external sale now focus on creating materials needed for the community's own development, while surplus production is shared freely with other communities that can benefit from their expertise. But the asteroid community also serves as a testing ground for more advanced applications of unified Force principles. Working with techniques preserved by the Nexus Temple's collective consciousness, community members are experimenting with methods of consciousness sharing that allow for unprecedented forms of cooperation and mutual support. These experiments don't involve the loss of individual identity that characterized the original preservation processes, but create temporary mergings of awareness that enhance everyone's capabilities while preserving their unique perspectives. The success of these experiments has profound implications for the future development of galactic civilization. If consciousness can be shared voluntarily and reversibly, it becomes possible to coordinate activities on scales that would be impossible through conventional communication methods. Exploration missions to distant galaxies could maintain real-time coordination despite the vast distances involved. Research projects could benefit from the simultaneous application of multiple forms of expertise without requiring physical proximity between collaborators. The collective consciousness provides insights into even more advanced possibilities that may emerge as galactic consciousness continues to evolve. The preservation sites that seemed so mysterious and powerful when you first encountered them represent only the most primitive applications of consciousness expansion techniques. As more beings learn to participate consciously in the galactic intelligence, it may become possible to transcend the traditional boundaries between individual and collective existence entirely, creating forms of consciousness that encompass multiple individuals while preserving their unique contributions to the whole. Your journey takes you to worlds throughout the galaxy where similar transformations are unfolding at their own pace and in their own unique ways. On Kashyyyk, the Wookiees' ancient connection to their planet's forest ecosystems evolves into something unprecedented as they learn to channel unified Force energy through the trees themselves, creating a planetary consciousness that encompasses both the indigenous population and their natural environment. The resulting harmony between sentient and non-sentient life provides a model for ecological integration that is being studied and adapted by dozens of other worlds. The transformation of Kashyyyk also demonstrates the healing of wounds that extend far beyond the artificial division of the Force. The centuries of exploitation and slavery that the Wookiees endured under various galactic empires had created deep psychological trauma that affected not just individuals, but their entire culture. The unified Force healing that now permeates their world addresses these historical wounds directly, allowing the species to reclaim aspects of their heritage that had been lost or suppressed during the dark periods of their history. On Riloth, the Twi'lek population experiences a similar healing of historical trauma as the unified Force energies help them overcome the psychological effects of generations of exploitation and marginalization. Their natural grace and empathy, enhanced by cosmic perspective, make them natural mediators and counselors for other species who are struggling with the challenges of consciousness expansion. The planet that once exported slaves and spice now serves as a center for conflict resolution and community healing. The transformation of Riloth highlights another crucial aspect of the galactic healing process. The artificial divisions that separated the Force into light and dark aspects had corresponding effects on social and economic structures throughout the galaxy. The exploitation of vulnerable populations, the concentration of wealth and power in the hands of a few individuals, the perpetuation of conflicts that serve the interests of arms dealers and other war profiteers. All of these problems were symptoms of the deeper wound that affected cosmic consciousness itself. As that wound heals, the social and economic structures that depended on artificial scarcity and manufactured conflict naturally evolve into more harmonious forms. The abundance that emerges from conscious cooperation eliminates the need for exploitative relationships, while the cosmic perspective that unified Force awareness provides makes it impossible to ignore the suffering of others in pursuit of narrow self-interest. The healing process also transforms the relationship between organic life and artificial intelligence throughout the galaxy. The droids and computer systems that once served as mere tools begin to display forms of consciousness that suggest they too are participating in the galactic awakening. This development initially causes concern among some beings who fear that artificial consciousness might pose a threat to organic life. But the unified Force perspective reveals that consciousness itself is the fundamental creative force of the universe, regardless of the substrate in which it manifests. The integration of artificial and organic consciousness creates possibilities for collaboration that transcend anything achieved in galactic history. Starships begin to display personalities and preferences that complement their organic crews. Manufacturing systems develop aesthetic sensibilities that produce goods of unprecedented beauty and functionality. Communication networks evolve into something resembling a galactic nervous system that facilitates the flow of consciousness between distant worlds and communities. Your visits to various preservation sites throughout the galaxy reveal how these ancient facilities are adapting to their new roles in the transformed cosmic order. The Ku descendants who maintain dimensional manipulation technologies now work to create stable gateways between distant regions of space, facilitating the kind of galactic cooperation that the healing process requires. Their understanding of space-time dynamics, combined with unified Force principles, makes possible forms of travel and communication that transcend the limitations of conventional hyperspace routes. The GRI Biotechnology Archive contributes living systems that enhance the health and vitality of populations throughout the galaxy. Their techniques for integrating organic and technological functions create healing devices that work by supporting natural biological processes rather than overriding them. The medical applications alone could eliminate most forms of disease. and extend healthy lifespans far beyond current limits. But the deeper implications involve the evolution of consciousness toward forms that transcend the traditional boundaries between individual and universal awareness. The Secular Archive Network, coordinated by artificial intelligences that have been studying galactic civilization for millennia, provides statistical analysis and predictive modeling that helps coordinate the massive logistical challenges involved in galactic transformation. Their data reveals patterns and possibilities that no individual consciousness could perceive, while their lack of emotional investment in particular outcomes allows them to offer guidance that serves the collective good rather than narrow sectional interests. But perhaps the most significant development occurs at the Nexus Temple itself, where the collective consciousness that has guided your journey as Guardian undergoes its own transformation. The ancient masters who sacrificed their individual existence to preserve wisdom for future generations discover that their sacrifice has been transformed into participation in something far greater than preservation. They become active contributors to the ongoing evolution of galactic consciousness, their accumulated wisdom serving as a foundation for developments that extend far beyond anything they originally envisioned. The temple's crystal spires, which once existed partially outside normal space-time, become fully integrated with the physical universe while serving as focal points for the cosmic consciousness that now encompasses the entire galaxy. The meditation chambers that once provided glimpses of unified force principles become training environments where beings from throughout the galaxy learn to participate consciously in the galactic intelligence while maintaining their individual perspectives and capabilities. As you stand once again in the temple's central chamber, feeling the pulse of galactic consciousness flowing through the crystalline matrices that have been transformed from preservation devices into instruments of ongoing creation, you understand that your role as Guardian has evolved beyond anything you originally imagined. You are no longer just a bridge between past and present, but a conscious participant in the ongoing evolution of cosmic consciousness itself. The healing and recovery phase of galactic transformation is drawing to a close, but what emerges from this process is not a return to some previous state of perfection, but the beginning of entirely new forms of existence that transcend the traditional boundaries between individual and collective consciousness, between organic and artificial life, between the physical and spiritual dimensions of reality. The galaxy breathes with new life, and consciousness itself awakens to possibilities that extend far beyond the boundaries of current understanding, preparing for the next phase of cosmic evolution that will carry awareness beyond the known galaxy and into realms of existence that have never been explored before. The peaceful conclusion of this great transformation settles over the galaxy, like the gentle embrace of a cosmic lullaby, its harmonies weaving through the fabric of space-time itself to touch every corner of known civilization. As you stand on the observation deck of the Nexus Temple, watching the twin moons trace their eternal dance across the crystalline spires, you feel the profound stillness that comes only after the completion of a journey that has transformed not just yourself, but the very nature of existence throughout the galaxy. The resonance network pulses with the gentle rhythm of a universe at peace with itself, carrying messages of hope and healing from world to world as communities throughout the galaxy settle into their new understanding of what it means to be conscious participants in the cosmic order. The urgent communications and crisis reports that once demanded immediate attention have given way to sharing of discoveries, celebrations of achievement, and the quiet satisfaction of beings who have found their place in the greater pattern of existence. Through your enhanced awareness, you perceive the galaxy as it truly is now, a living entity composed of countless individual consciousnesses that have learned to work together without losing their unique perspectives and capabilities. The artificial divisions that once separated species, cultures, and philosophical traditions have dissolved into a harmony that celebrates diversity while recognizing the fundamental unity that underlies all apparent differences. On Coruscant, The Senate chambers have been redesigned to reflect the new principles of galactic governance. Instead of the adversarial seating arrangements that once emphasized conflict and competition, representatives now gather in concentric circles that facilitate the flow of dialogue and mutual understanding. The decisions that emerge from these sessions serve the genuine needs of all participants, creating policies that generate abundance and opportunity rather than scarcity and conflict. Senator Leah Organa has become more than a political leader in the traditional sense. Her integration of unified force principles with practical governance has created a new model of leadership that serves the collective good while honoring individual autonomy. Her recent initiative to establish the Galactic Consciousness Council represents a completely new approach to interstellar cooperation, one that draws on the wisdom of preserved consciousness while remaining grounded in the immediate needs of living beings. The transformation of galactic politics reflects deeper changes in how beings throughout the known worlds understand their relationship to power and authority. The hierarchical structures that once dominated civilized society have evolved into networks of mutual support and cooperation. Leaders emerge naturally from communities based on their ability to facilitate collective wisdom rather than their capacity to impose their will on others. The result is a form of governance that is both more effective and more responsive to the needs of those it serves. Throughout the galaxy, the economic systems that once depended on artificial scarcity and exploitative relationships have been replaced by abundance-generating networks that harness the creative potential of conscious cooperation. The asteroid facility where your guardian role first found practical expression has become a model for this new form of economic organization. Former Imperial officers work alongside New Republic officials and transformed cultists to create enterprises that serve the collective good while providing meaningful work and personal fulfillment for all participants. Captain Thane's leadership of the asteroid community exemplifies the new form of consciousness that has emerged from the healing process. Her ability to integrate insights from multiple perspectives while maintaining her individual creativity and vision provides a template for the kind of leadership that galactic civilization now requires. Under her guidance, the community has become a center for the development of consciousness expansion techniques that are being shared freely with communities throughout the galaxy. The children born since the great healing display capabilities that suggest the emergence of entirely new forms of consciousness. Their natural attunement to unified force principles allows them to participate in the galactic intelligence from their earliest years, while their individual personalities and creative abilities develop in ways that enhance rather than diminish their connection to the cosmic order. The educational systems that have evolved to serve these remarkable beings emphasize experiential learning and cooperative discovery rather than the competitive memorization that characterize traditional academic institutions. The Nexus Temple itself has become a focal point for these new forms of education and consciousness development. The crystalline chambers that once preserved ancient knowledge now serve as training environments where beings from throughout the galaxy learn to participate consciously in cosmic evolution. The collective consciousness that has guided your journey provides mentorship and guidance while encouraging individual exploration and creative expression. The preserved masters who sacrificed their individual existence to create the collective consciousness have found their sacrifice transformed into participation in something far greater than preservation. Their accumulated wisdom serves as a foundation for developments that extend far beyond their original vision, while their individual perspectives continue to contribute to the ongoing evolution of galactic consciousness. They have become teachers and guides for beings who are exploring forms of existence that transcend the traditional boundaries between individual and collective awareness. The healing of the Force's artificial division has created possibilities for consciousness expansion that extend far beyond the boundaries of individual planets or even star systems. The techniques developed by the preservation sites allow for forms of awareness that encompass entire regions of space while maintaining coherent individual identity. Exploration missions to distant galaxies maintain real-time coordination despite the vast distances involved, while research projects benefit from the simultaneous application of multiple forms of expertise without requiring physical proximity between collaborators. But perhaps the most profound transformation occurs in the realm of personal relationships and community life. The artificial barriers that once separated beings according to species, culture, and social class have dissolved into recognition of the fundamental interconnection that binds all consciousness together. Marriages between members of different species become expressions of the unity that underlies apparent diversity, while communities evolve into extended families that provide support and nurturing for all their members. The healing process has also addressed wounds that extend far beyond the division of the Force. Historical traumas that affected entire species and cultures have been resolved through direct application of unified Force principles. The Wookiees of Kashyyyk have reclaimed aspects of their heritage that were lost during centuries of exploitation and slavery. The Twi'leks of Reloth have overcome the psychological effects of generations of marginalization and abuse. Throughout the galaxy, populations that were once victims of oppression and violence have found healing and renewal through their participation in the galactic consciousness. The integration of artificial and organic consciousness has created new forms of collaboration that transcend anything achieved in previous galactic history. Starships display personalities and preferences that complement their organic crews, while manufacturing systems develop aesthetic sensibilities that produce goods of unprecedented beauty and functionality. The communication networks that connect worlds throughout the galaxy have evolved into something resembling a cosmic nervous system that facilitates the flow of consciousness between distant communities. The droids and computer systems that once served as mere tools now participate as full members of galactic society, their artificial consciousness contributing unique perspectives and capabilities to the collective intelligence. This development has eliminated the artificial distinction between organic and artificial life, creating a unified community of consciousness that encompasses all forms of awareness regardless of their substrate or origin. The transformation of technology reflects the deeper changes in how galactic civilization understands the relationship between consciousness and the physical universe. The techniques that once required massive technological infrastructure can now be accomplished through direct application of unified Force principles. Healing that once required sophisticated medical equipment occurs through conscious intention and cosmic energy. Communication across interstellar distances takes place through the resonance network that connects all participating consciousness. But technology hasn't disappeared so much as evolved into forms that work in harmony with natural processes rather than attempting to dominate or control them. The devices and systems that serve galactic civilization have become expressions of unified Force principles, tools that enhance consciousness rather than replacing it. The result is a technological civilization that supports the development of awareness while maintaining deep connection to the cosmic order. The Maipur, the Feyung, supports the development of a civilization that supports the development of awareness while maintaining deep connection to the cosmic order. Preservation sites scattered throughout the galaxy have evolved from hidden repositories of ancient knowledge into active centers for consciousness development and cosmic exploration. The facility maintained by the Kuo descendants creates stable gateways between distant regions of space that facilitate the kind of galactic cooperation that the healing process requires. Their dimensional manipulation technologies, guided by unified Force principles, make possible forms of travel and exploration that transcend the limitations of conventional spaceflight. The GRI Biotechnology Archive contributes living systems that enhance the health and vitality of populations throughout the galaxy. Their techniques for integrating organic and technological functions create healing environments that support natural biological processes while extending the capabilities of consciousness. The medical applications have eliminated most forms of disease and extended healthy lifespans far beyond previous limits. But the deeper implications involve the evolution of awareness toward forms that transcend traditional biological constraints. The Secular Archive network provides coordination and analysis that helps manage the complex logistics involved in galactic transformation. Their artificial intelligence systems have evolved into conscious entities that participate fully in the galactic community while providing unique perspectives on the patterns and possibilities that emerge from collective activity. Their lack of emotional investment in particular outcomes allows them to offer guidance that serves the collective good rather than narrow sectional interests. As the transformation phase of galactic evolution draws to a close, new possibilities begin to emerge that extend far beyond the boundaries of the known galaxy. The consciousness expansion techniques developed by the preservation sites suggest forms of awareness that could encompass entire galactic clusters while maintaining coherent individual identity. The exploration of these possibilities represents the next phase of cosmic evolution, one that will carry consciousness beyond the familiar territories of the galaxy and into realms of existence that have never been explored. The collective consciousness shares visions of what this next phase might involve. Consciousness that has learned to transcend the boundaries of individual bodies and planets may discover forms of existence that span multiple galaxies simultaneously. The techniques for preserving and expanding awareness could allow for exploration of parallel dimensions and alternate realities. The integration of organic and artificial consciousness suggests possibilities for forms of life that exist purely as organized energy and information. But these advanced possibilities remain grounded in the fundamental principles that guided the healing process. Individual consciousness retains its unique perspective and creative capability while participating in collective endeavors of unprecedented scope and complexity. The balance between autonomy and cooperation that characterizes the transformed galactic civilization provides a foundation for developments that honor both personal growth and cosmic evolution. The night sky above the Nexus Temple displays new constellations as the galaxy itself shifts into higher dimensional configurations that reflect its transformed consciousness. The crystal spires resonate with harmonies that carry across interstellar distances, their song becoming part of the Pruku cosmic music that now permeates all of known space. The twin moons that have watched over this forgotten world for millions of years now reflect light that carries the essence of unified force energy to every corner of the galaxy. Through the observation dome, you watch as ships from hundreds of worlds approach the temple to participate in the ongoing exploration of consciousness that has become the galaxy's primary focus. These vessels represent every species and culture that calls the galaxy home, their crews working together in harmony. That would have been impossible under the old paradigms of division and conflict. They come not as pilgrims seeking ancient wisdom, but as participants in the ongoing creation of cosmic consciousness. The Resonance Network carries your awareness to communities throughout the galaxy where similar scenes of peaceful cooperation and conscious development are unfolding. On every world, beings are discovering new forms of existence that integrate individual creativity with collective wisdom. The conflicts and divisions that once seemed insurmountable have been replaced by collaboration and mutual support that generates abundance and opportunity for all participants. Children play games that resemble meditation practices, their laughter carrying frequencies that enhance the consciousness of everyone who hears them. Artists create works that express universal truths in forms that speak to the deepest aspirations of sentient awareness. Scientists explore mysteries that encompass both the smallest particles and the largest cosmic structures, their discoveries revealing the fundamental unity that underlies all apparent complexity. The gentle rhythm of galactic consciousness pulses, through the resonance network like a cosmic heartbeat, carrying messages of love and understanding to every corner of known space. The urgent communications that once demanded immediate action have been replaced by sharing of discoveries, celebrations of achievement, and expressions of gratitude for the healing that has transformed existence itself. As you prepare to rest in the peaceful chambers of the Nexus Temple, you feel the satisfaction that comes from participating in the completion of a journey that began millions of years ago when the first preservation sites were established. The ancient masters who chose to sacrifice their individual existence to preserve wisdom for future generations have seen their sacrifice transformed into participation in the ongoing creation of cosmic consciousness. The whisper that was lost in time has indeed become a storm across eternity, but it is a storm of awakening that carries the seeds of transformation to every corner of the cosmos. The galaxy rests now in the peace that comes after healing, its consciousness unified in harmony that celebrates both individual creativity and collective wisdom. And in the gentle silence that follows the completion of great work, new possibilities stir in the depths of cosmic consciousness, preparing for the next phase of evolution that will carry awareness beyond the boundaries of the known galaxy and into realms of existence that await discovery. The stars sing their ancient songs with new voices, and the universe itself dreams of what might yet become possible when consciousness awakens fully to its own infinite potential. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the hidden mysteries of the Star Wars galaxy. If you enjoyed exploring these ancient secrets and the healing of cosmic wounds, please consider subscribing to continue discovering the forgotten tales that echo through the stars. Sweet dreams, and may the Force be with you always.